It is Sunday night, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. Let's go. It is game week. Let's talk some football. Michigan State football getting ready to play Florida Atlantic University Friday night at Spartan Stadium, season opener, Labor Day weekend. Thank you to the Big Ten Conference for allowing Michigan State to do this for their fans. Most fans want it this way. And they actually listened and went along with it. Congratulations to Alan Haller. Did some work. As he said, his quote, had to do some work to get that done, got it done. And I think it's a great tradition at Michigan State, something that Mark Hollis began, and it makes perfect sense in the state of Michigan. Labor Day weekend to play on Friday rather than Saturday. Go to the game Friday, then you have the rest of your weekend, as a lot of Michiganders do, whether you're going up north or whatever you do. You will have a full Labor Day weekend without the football Saturday cutting into that. I know some people are like, well, what's wrong with the football Saturday cutting into it? Well, if you know, you know. And it's a new tradition because basically the 12-game season has only been going on since what? 2004, 2003, I can't really remember. It was 11 games prior to that. So when the season became a 12-game season, it encroached upon Labor Day weekend. I know back in 1987, Michigan State played USC in a very famous game, the first night game in the history of Spartan Stadium. That was Labor Day Monday, 1987. But for the most part, college football for generations really didn't begin until the second week of September. But the last 20 years or so, Labor Day weekend has marked week one of the college football season since they've gone to 12 games. Went to 12 games for money on the backs of players. Players getting paid now, which I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think anyone does anymore, especially since all that money's out there for TV money and coaches were getting paid so much. The moral compass and all that changed, in my opinion, and for a lot of people as well. Not that my opinion matters. But it's been a tradition in Michigan State to play Labor Day Friday since it became a 12-game schedule. Mark Hollis started it. It's been a success. There were a couple times when it was moved to Saturday, and one time it was, I think, Friday at Northwestern. But for the most part, if Michigan State's playing a mid-level non-conference game at home, kudos to the Big Ten Conference for listening to Michigan State. Kudos to Alan Haller for forwarding that agenda piece and getting it done. And fans, you've got a Friday night game in East Lansing this weekend. The Friday night game in November is another story. But we got a game this weekend, Michigan State against Florida Atlantic. I'll be taking a look at Florida Atlantic as the week progresses. Tonight, speaking more about Michigan State and how the Spartans are looking heading into this last week. This is game prep week. Now, game prep week started a day or two ago. Preseason camp essentially ended a few days ago. We will talk a little bit about the depth chart. We got questions here that were posted over at SpartanMag.com. Underground Bunker message board. If you're not sure what any of this nonsense is all about, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Been that way since the early 90s, been that way since the beginning of the internet, been having a lot of fun, and really appreciate the Michigan State fans that have supported Spartan Mag over the years. Really do appreciate that. Give us a like here on the channel, subscribe to the channel, then you will get a push notification anytime we are live, then you can join us live. First time we've done live here in a couple of weeks. I wanted to do some more. Would like to do some more later this week. I think Monday, if you're watching this on Sunday, on Monday, first press conference of the season, Jonathan Smith will be speaking over at the Izzo Media Room at Spartan Stadium, previewing Florida Atlantic and giving us the latest about Michigan State heading into game week. Of course, they're not going to tell us everything. They have to keep some things confidential. They have a game plan to put together. They're going to have a good, solid FAU team that they need to beat on Friday as well. FAU last year was 4-8. Quarterback transferred out to Florida A&M. The former quarterback was quarterback at Central Michigan for a couple of years. He goes to Florida A&M. They went into the portal, and they got Cam Fancher. Pretty good one out of Marshall, left-handed mobility, solid winning quarterback at Marshall. But the defense for FAU is going to be pretty good. I'll be looking into that more thoroughly in the days ahead. As far as Michigan State goes, over at the Underground Bunker message board, I let people know earlier today that we would be doing Spartan Mag Live tonight. And the maggers over at the Underground Bunker message board gave us some questions, mailbag questions, about 12, 13, or 14 of those. We will be addressing those questions tonight. Those questions coming from the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative on Michigan State sports over at SpartanMag.com, which is the premium website covering Michigan State. Been doing it that way since the beginning of the internet. SpartanMag.com, part of the On3 network. Go over there, check it out, become a subscriber. We'd love to have you. If you become a subscriber right now, you can go back and read all the preseason coverage we've had all month covering camp extensively. and also a lot of conversation at the Underground Bunker message board. And we'd love to have you over there to check it out. And I'd love to have you as a new subscriber anytime. All right, question number 1 comes from Spartan Fan 81 from Orange County, California. Excuse me, I should have turned the microphone off for that. We go commercial free here, so I mean, I've got a reader that we're excited to have, and we've had that for the last couple of weeks. We'll be doing that, but we don't turn it off and take a break. So if I have to have a hot beverage, it's going to happen. You don't care. Spartan Fan 81, Orange County, California says, "What are you hearing, Jim, on who is impressing in camp? Any camp darlings?" Camp darlings. Interesting choice of words. As far as what we're hearing, it's bits and pieces, and I've got a list of some players we've been hearing some good things about, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other players that are not doing well that we're not hearing about. So this is not like a finite list, but these are some names that we're hearing are doing pretty well. Charles Brantley doing pretty well. He's a redshirt junior now. It's his 4th year. Redshirted last year, played 3 or 4 games. Got banged up a little bit. Shut it down, preserved redshirt status. Slim guy that's never really added a lot of weight. A guy that got on the field quite a bit as a true freshman back in 2021. You might remember that he had the interception that cinched the victory over Michigan in 2021. So he made a real quick impact immediately as a true freshman in 21, then was injured the next week. The next year battled some injuries. Last year only played 3 or 4 games. Entered the portal, and from what I heard, there weren't a lot of great offers out there. Now, Charles, if that's not true, you can correct me on that, or your agent can, but that's what I heard. Meanwhile, Michigan State re-recruited him, came back, played in the spring, went through the summer, and then preseason camp has taken it up a notch. He's impressed the people over there. I don't know if that means he's going to start. I'm projecting him to start, but they're going to play at least 3 corners, rotate him around. But Brantley's answered the bell pretty good. A name you've been hearing for 2 or 3 years, which is refreshing because there's 61 new players on this team, 43 new scholarship players. So basically, it's kind of a low number of names that you would recognize if you've been a Michigan State fan for 2 or 3 or 4 years. If you've been a college football fan for years, normally you are accustomed to juniors and seniors being guys that have been around the program for a number of years. But because of the portal era, because of the coaching change and so forth, and the way Tucker turned over the roster prior to this, and the way people left, and the way a new coach turns it over when Smith came in, really a shortage of returning familiar names. They're out there, but it's not like there's 30 or 40 of them. There's maybe 15 or 20 of them. Brantley is one, and he's taking it up a notch, hearing good things about him. Also, the corner position, Chance Rucker. Last year's a true freshman, played, I think, over 500 snaps. I've mentioned before that Rucker impressed me last year, mainly because, in my opinion, he did not look like a freshman. I'm sure he did if you really looked at every snap with a coach's eye, which I don't have at the major college football level. But I'm sure they can look and find some freshman moments here and there. But just from 10,000 feet watching it and watching every game last year, there were certainly a lot of problems. But I don't remember pinning many or any on Chance Rucker and thinking, gosh, that was a freshman mistake right there. Again, I'm sure there were some, but not a lot. He was pretty solid last year, became a starter ahead of guys like, some returning players like Marquis Lowry, who kind of vanished, and Chester Kimbrough, who kind of vanished, and Kari Crump, who kind of vanished. Those were portal guys that Mel Tucker brought in, but early in the season, Rucker became the guy and started most of the season. He's back as a true sophomore. I'm hearing he's taking another step. Tight end Michael Masunas, a guy that's not been on the field yet in the fall, redshirted 2 years ago. Last year was lost to injury. Had a pretty good spring, good summer, an even better preseason camp. Looking like he's the number 2 tight end, and this is an offense that will utilize a tight end. Everybody knows about Jack Velling coming in from Oregon State. Michael Masunas, below the radar guy, bottom 40 type of guy for a couple of years, but ready to break in as what it looks like the number 2 tight end. I mean, Brendan Parachek's got all kinds of talent, but he's got to get healthy. But in the meantime, Masunas doing some things as a blocker, doing some things as a reliable receiver. Like Brian Wozniak, Michigan State's tight end coach, said a couple weeks ago, not a one-trick pony. So Michael Masunas, write him down as someone who's impressing at camp. And when I say impressing, I'm not saying he's the best player on the team, but maybe some names that you might not expect. And that's another question we'll get to in a moment related to all this. Dylan Tatum, I'm hearing he's doing pretty well. That's a guy that played corner out of necessity for a couple of weeks. I'm working on an article right now about Michigan State's safeties. He's playing safety full-time now for the first time. Well, he was full-time safety as a true freshman back in 22, but had to move to corner due to some injuries. Stayed there. Then last year played mainly at corner, not his natural position. Was functional. Got picked on by some teams here and there. Not a natural cover corner, so and that showed a little bit. But anytime you have a freshman and then a true sophomore who's playing corner out of necessity, that speaks to his versatility and overall football acumen. Now he's moving to safety, a little bit at nickel, and it bodes well for his future. When I think about guys that played corner out of position early in their career, I'm thinking about guys like Eric Morris. It's a true freshman out of Berkeley. I think Saban's first or second year. Lamar Marshall out of Ohio, first or second year, playing corner because that's the way Saban wanted it. Those guys won those jobs. Later in their careers, moved to safety, became NFL safeties. Wouldn't shock me if Dylan Tatum became an NFL safety, and we would look back and say, yeah, he played corner out of necessity. You're playing corner out of necessity, and it's not your natural position. That's one of the hardest positions to play on the field. And I'm not saying he was great over there, but the guy's a junior already and is true junior. But some of the comments, Blue Adams yesterday, Michigan State's defensive backs coach, he's overseeing the safeties. When asked about Dylan Tatum, he raised his eyebrows and said, he is a ball player, unquote. I'm trying to recreate the way he said it. You can go over and watch the Blue Adams interviews here on the channel from last week, and you can gain a little bit on the voice inflection and what he thinks about him. Demetrius Martin asked him about Tatum a little bit, and he said he's not played any corner for me yet, but he sees him on the field. And Demetrius Martin was a DB's coach at Oregon and a number of other places. He's focusing on corners now, but he knows the safety when he sees one. And his quote is that Dylan Tatum is, quote, like a sawed-off will linebacker, unquote. Sawed-off will linebacker. In other words, he's playing with some physicality. So Dylan Tatum, you've not seen him at safety yet in Michigan State. Maybe one or two games early in 2022 he might have played over there. But he's more of a natural inside guy, and I think Dylan Tatum could be ready to take a step. That's what I'm expecting. As far as others that we're hearing about that are camp darlings, like you said, are impressing at camp. Backup quarterback Tommy Schuster is doing some good things. You hear good things about him. Alante Brown, last year was a wide receiver, transfer from Nebraska, had 17 catches, I think it was, at Nebraska the previous year. Last year, Michigan State, 1 or 2 catches, and had some problems on special teams. Didn't have his greatest year, but attitude is good. And he's got some possession receiver talent, maybe more of a natural slot receiver than some of the others. Would not be shocked if he starts. I think he's going to be in the rotation as a slot guy, so Alante Brown, don't close the door on him. Dallas Fincher, started at center last year out of necessity when Samac was hurt a little bit and struggled. Is he a fifth-year senior now? And I kind of thought that he had hit his ceiling, but I've heard that he's done okay. He's not going to start. That's going to be Tanner Miller, but Fincher's backing him up, and Fincher's, I think, repping a little bit at guard as well. But that's a guy later in his career that you may think that we've seen. I guess he's had a good camp and taken his game up a notch, which is good to hear. Others, Jordan Turner coming in transfer from linebacker from Wisconsin, was honorable mention All Big Ten in 2022 at Wisconsin. Last year started a lot 2 years ago. Not sure exactly what happened. For whatever reason, he was looking to get out there at Wisconsin, come back to his home state of Michigan. He's from Farmington Hills, Harrison. No, not Harrison, but he's from Farmington Hills, Michigan, Jordan Turner. And he's come in. Hey, he was named one of the captains. He's doing well at inside linebacker. A proven Big Ten player, getting a second chance at a new place closer to home, still in the Big Ten. He's excited. He's won over his teammates. Jordan Turner is going to be a plus. Also, Quindarius Dunnigan, transfer from Showcase, a guy that was second team all-conference at Middle Tennessee State last year. That's the American Conference, right? I get the American and the Sun Belt mixed up sometimes. I apologize about that. But Dunnigan, I liked him in the spring game. Liked his Middle Tennessee State film. He's had a summer to get even more acclimated to Michigan State's system. And Maverick Hansen, we spoke with him last week, and he was talking about some teammates, and he kind of, and he said, Quindarius Dunnigan, he just kind of mentioned him briefly. But anytime you get that kind of voice inflection, it's genuine. And frankly, I don't have Dunnigan in my starting lineup. I thought for sure he'd be a starter. I thought that Jalen Thompson and Dunnigan would be the two best defensive ends, but now, Jalen Thompson's moved back over to down defensive end. Chris Bokel's been apparently the number one stand-up rush end. And I would have expected Bogle and Thompson to be better than, I would have expected Dunnigan and Jalen Thompson to be better than Bogle. But based on what we've seen, heard, and been told, it sounds like Bogle's going to start. So either Thompson or Dunnigan's not going to start. I guess I'm putting Thompson as my forecasted starter, but there's good things being talked about with Dunnigan. Saw it with my own eyes in the spring. Good, solid player. He's a good one. In terms of total snaps, I don't know if Dunnigan and Thompson, if they're splitting snaps 50-50 there, that down defensive end, I think that's going to be a productive position. Bogle's got to show he can do it. This is his chance. 6th-year player coming up from, where was he from? Fort Lauderdale or maybe Georgia. Bogle played at the University of Florida for a couple years, made some plays as a young player at Florida, then his productivity kind of lagged a little bit. He was a 4-star guy at Florida, I think. Tucker brought him in as out of the portal, played a little bit in 2022, looked pretty good against the run in 2022, didn't give him much in the pass rush, played 3 or 4 games, season-ending injury against Minnesota, out for the year, came back last year, was kind of functional, not great, came back for a 6th year at Michigan State. He's been around for 3 years now. You get a transfer who's been around for 3 years. He's one of the longer tenured Michigan State players now. And he came in as a late career transfer. He's still around. Now he's playing that stand-up end, which is more similar to the way he played early in his career at Florida. So he's excited about it, that it's similar to what he did when he was playing at his best in Florida back then. So Bogle, wish him well. Have still not seen him turn it on in a Michigan State uniform. But if they've got him pegged as a starter, maybe he is, in fact, taking it up a notch, and they need that. But from what I've seen, I don't know. I still think Dunnigan and Thompson would be the guys. But if Bogle is indeed that good, we'll begin to find out on Friday, and it would be good for Michigan State if Bogle is indeed that good. Now, got some more questions we'll get to here in a moment. It's good to see you've got a big crowd on a Sunday night getting ready for football. I think it's going to be stripe the stadium this weekend, right? So everybody knows what to do about that. I think that's what it is. I think I heard that over at the bunker. People are talking about that. I love Friday night opener. Last year was against Central Michigan in the Connor Stallions Bowl, as it turned out. But of course, the season went off the cliff and became a dumpster fire. Everybody knows that. The best football atmosphere of the year turned out to be that opener against Central Michigan. The next week they beat Richmond, then all the crap hit the fan with Tucker, and then the Washington game was a blowout, and other blowouts through the course of the year. I mean, it felt good for Harlan Barnett and others when Michigan State beat Nebraska, and that was a nice moment later in the year. But Central Michigan game, place was pretty much full. Weather was great. Central came in as a respectable opponent. You had a lot of Central Michigan fans around, chirping around. Good for them. They were doing that. So you had some of that in-state familiarity, which made for a great atmosphere. And I've said it a few times that was the best atmosphere of the season. Friday night, Labor Day weekend, and it'll be Friday night, Labor Day weekend again this weekend, not against an in-state opponent. I don't know if we'll ever see Central Michigan here again. I don't know how that's all going to pan out. That's going to be interesting. But Florida Atlantic's coming in here, and that was the place where Lane Kiffin got his resurrection. Now Herman, the head coach at FAU in year number 2, trying to get his resurrection. A guy that was, coach savant du jour when he was coordinator for Urban Meyer back when they beat Alabama in the semifinals of 2014. That was Herman, right? Then he ended up at Texas. Was he at Houston for a little bit? Did a good job at Houston. Went to Texas. Things kind of went a little sideways. Different kind of cat. Not sure that went over particularly great with Longhorn faithful. Now he's back at FAU, which is where Kiffin went when Kiffin had a meteoric rise. Tennessee, then USC got fired. FAU got it back together again. Then Ole Miss. Now Ole Miss is a college football playoff favorite deep into the top 10. So Herman's trying to do the same thing there at FAU, year number 2. A guy that's been a high-priced guy in the past. Herman and FAU, they're not coming up here to lose. So they're going to show up, and we'll see what's going on with that. But getting excited about Friday. Not sure what's going to happen. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation for deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits. Today, only 73% are being redeemed. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on the environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, it hurts all of us. So help the environment, help your state, help yourself, take them back. Take those cans and bottles back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. A message from Shoepan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. Shoepan wants you to take them back, and I want you to do that too. Shoepan's been a long time supporter of Michigan State sports. If you listen to the radio broadcast, you hear that they are been an advertiser in Michigan State sports for a long time. We appreciate them coming aboard and helping support SpartanMag.com, and we support them with that movement as well. Question number 2 from Freeland, Michigan. We will get to that one in a moment, but first let's check out the comments. Feel free to comment over here in the comments section. Rob South says, "What's up, fellas?" He's in the starting 5. Sparty Party says, let's go. I'm not sure we've seen Sparty Party in the starting 5 before, have we? That's a new one. Good for him. Austin Wolf, go green. 5 days. Eric M says, go green. And Noah Vandlin says, good evening, comp. Checking in from Diamonddale, Michigan, fresh off Spartan marching band preseason. Love to hear that. Got to do that. Sorry about that. Spartan Marching Band preseason. I like the way that sounds. I've heard a little bit of the band piping up a little bit this preseason. I hope the SpartanMag drum lines are doing well, the best drum lines on the planet. I wish them another good year. I understand the Spartan Marching Band drum lines had another great recruiting class. Band. So I'll be going to press conference tomorrow, and it'll be a noonish type of thing, and I suspect that we parking, over there south side of the stadium, and walking to the football building. A lot of times you'll hear the band. A lot of times the drum line practicing over at Dem Hall. Then by the time Paul and I are doing the VCast, a lot of times the band will be practicing at that hour, but maybe not. I think the band won't quite be practicing, but that's always fun when that happens. When you hear that band, it's a good time. So Noah, good job with your work. There's always a big band thing, high school band thing over in Grand Ledge every year, and the Michigan State band plays over there, and all the band families who are there watching their kids and their bands, they watch Michigan State, one of the best. That's always a great sure sign of fall. Also under the radar, viewed by a few thousand over there. That's a good one. So Noah, good work over there. Make sure everybody does well. So you're starting 5. You got Rob South. We got Noah Vandlin. We got him in the starting lineup, putting that work in with the Spartan band, fresh off preseason camp. Good for him. Got Rob South running the point. Sparty Party drilling it from 3-point range. He's our shooting guard. Austin Wolf is the wing forward. We've had Austin Wolf in before because we said he sounds like a shooter, right? Wolf. Eric M. down low. I got Vandlin at the stretch 4. So appreciate everybody coming in and having fun with us today. We'll get to some more questions later on. As a matter of fact, just for kicks, I think it'll work. I haven't done this in a long time. We're going to open up the phone lines. I don't know if anyone feels like calling right now, but if anyone does, we've not done it in a while. I think the phone's going to work. Yeah, we'll go ahead and put that up there. I don't know if it'll work or not, but if anyone wants to, feel free. Question number 2. Freeland Spartan from Freeland, Michigan says, Jim, what is your final projection for the starting 11 on each side of the ball? You want the whole 22? All right, so this is not going to be final because we still have some interviews to do tomorrow and the next day, and we still need to wait to hear some more intel coming in. Sorry, I got a little shoulder thing going on. But no major surprises. I mean, I got a quarterback, Aiden Childs, 6'3", sophomore out of Long Beach, California. Running back Nate Carter, 5'10", 202 from Rochester, New York. He's a redshirt junior. Tight end Jack Velling, 6'5", 246, junior from Seattle. Wide receivers, Jerron Glover, 6'1", 204, redshirt sophomore from Sarasota. Article right now at SpartanMag.com. Jake Laskawa, who does a great job for us, has had an article about wide receivers coach Courtney Hawkins and the things he told us at last week's press conference. A lot of great quotes there. Courtney Hawkins is fired up. Said Jerron Glover's taking it up a notch. I keep using that phrase, taking it up a notch. There's probably a better way to say it, but that's what I'm stuck on now. But Glover indeed has. Got on the field 2 years ago. Last year, 14 catches. And a guy with some physicality at 204. I think Glover is going to be interesting to watch this season. I'm getting some strange readings here, but I think we're okay. Wide receiver Montori Foster, of course, as well, 6 feet, 186, senior from Cleveland, 44 catches last year. You know, and I've been doing a State of the Program series, did defensive linemen a couple days ago, and I had the depth chart on there. And I had Nick Marsh as the third receiver. Could be Alante Brown, could be Nick Marsh. I think it's going to be Nick Marsh. Nick Marsh, the coaches have said, is that he can play all 3 positions. He enrolled early and played some slot in the spring game. Now, his touchdown on the first play of the second half of the spring game was as the X, a split end, against the second or third string defense. Suited to be an X, a split end. That's what his natural position is. But do you bump Jerron Glover off of that position to put Marsh as a split end? Then maybe Foster in the slot? Body type-wise, that would make sense. But I think down the road, Marsh is definitely an X. But it became something that was talked about a lot on our message board that I had Marsh as a slot at 6'3". Yeah, that's uncommon size for that position. So I'm not sure how it's all going to shake out. All 3 of those guys can play different positions, but maybe they want to keep them in one position just to get their stems and everything exactly right. Foster, of course, is a veteran. Glover's becoming a veteran. Marsh is a true freshman. Not sure, but I think those are your 3 starting wide receivers. Wouldn't shock me if Alante Brown becomes a starter at the slot. We don't know for sure. They're keeping things quiet. Michigan State's has not released a depth chart since 2019. Who knows? Maybe they'll do it on Monday and all this stuff will be obsolete. But I'm going with Glover, Foster, and Nick Marsh at 6'3", 209, freshman from Detroit, River Rouge High School. Offensive line, left tackle Brandon Baldwin, 6'7", 327, senior from Detroit. Left guard Ryan Newman, transfer from Holy Cross, Brother Rice High School, 6'4", 310. At center, Tanner Miller, 6'2", 297, graduate, senior, transfer from Oregon State, Valencia, California. Right guard Christian Phillips, the man they call Big Dooley, 6'4", down to 315, redshirt sophomore, Conyers, Georgia. Nice, bright personality on that kid. Came in borderline 4-star. I was like, man, I don't know. The high school film needs a lot of work. And he's put in a lot of work. Lost some weight. It's gotten stronger. Played on field goal protection last year. Haven't really seen him on the field. Maybe a little bit of mop-up last year. Hung around. Everybody was joining the portal. He hung around. He had a good spring. Now he's ready to start at right guard. He played left guard most of the spring. Moved over to right guard when Newman came. So Big Dooley Phillips looks like he's on schedule. I think he's excited about being coached by Mahalchik. So Phillips is an interesting one to watch. Big human being and good attitude, liked by his teammates. So we'll see what big duel he's got on Friday. Right tackle, Ashton Lepo, 6'7", 296, redshirt sophomore from Grand Haven, Michigan. It's his turn. Spencer Brown goes into the portal. Lepo moves up. Sink or swim time. They need Lepo to come around. He's only a redshirt sophomore, and he needs to come around. Was okay in the spring game. 6'7", athletic. Need him to continue to develop into that frame. Need him there at right tackle. That's an X factor. I'm not exactly sure what we'll see there, but a lot of Michigan State fans wishing Ashton Lepo well. On defense, at rush end, we'll go with Chris Bogle. That's what we've been told. He started in the spring game. Looks like it's still that way. Was not that great in the spring game, quite frankly. There was a long touchdown run by Nate Carter, and Bogle, there was kind of a stunt, and one of the gaps went unmanned, unhosted, and Bogle was in the area. Not sure if it was him or not, but just, I don't know. But like I said earlier, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're hoping that Bogle really turns it around, turns it on this year. I know he's got the ability to do it. He's excited about it. He's a veteran, third year in the program, sixth year in college football. They could use a big year out of him. So I think Bogle's starting. At the other defensive end, I'm going to say Jalen Thompson, 6'3", 253, sophomore from Detroit. He finished last year as the starter as a true freshman. He's got a really good future. He's got some leadership ability. But if he's starting, that means Quindarius Dunnigan, a player that I think has some nice potential to do some good things this year for Michigan State. That would mean Dunnigan would be coming off the bench. Dunnigan can also slide inside a little bit. Jalen Thompson played the rush end in the spring, and they took a look at it, and for whatever reason decided to put him back over there at defensive end in the down three-point stance, down lineman defensive end. As of 2 weeks ago, he had not moved back over to rush end, but I guess in a pinch they could move him over to rush end if they wanted to. Long story short, I'm guessing Thompson and Dunnigan are going to split those snaps. I wouldn't be surprised if they split them close to 50-50. And if they do, I think they'll get pretty good play out of that position from those guys. But who's starting? Would not surprise me if it's Dunnigan, but I'm going to say Jalen Thompson. Defensive tackle Maverick Hansen's going to be starting. I think it's a pretty safe bet. Voted captain last week, 6'4", 310, graduate senior out of Farmington Hills, Michigan. I love Maverick Hansen. Can I say that? Does that mean that I'm not a credible reporter if I say that? I like a lot of these guys. I got to tell you. I mean, you're around these young guys, youthful enthusiasm, all those things. Does that make me a reporter with less credibility? Maybe, I don't know, but I'm a human being. These people are pretty cool. Hansen, the things he's been through, I mean, he's seen it all, right? Commits to D'Antonio, plays a couple years with Tucker. Now he's on his third coach. He was at Farmington Hills Harrison. They closed that school. He was with the final football team at Farmington Hills Harrison. Really wanted to be a Spartan. Came to Michigan State's camp. Tried very hard to get a scholarship offer. Didn't get it. Committed, I think, to Central. Then Michigan State came with a scholarship offer at the 11th hour, the day before signing day, the night before signing day. He flips, signs with Michigan State. I've told this story before, but I don't know when I've seen someone camp at Michigan State that wanted a Michigan State scholarship offer more than Maverick Hansen did that day in the summer of 2019, I guess. I've told this story before. Back then, I mean, they measure things. They measure vertical jump at camp. These are recruits, potential recruits. They measure 40-yard dash times. And really at a camp like that, there might be 100 players, 150 players, and maybe 5 have Michigan State scholarship offers. So a lot of players want them, right? They're looking at Maverick Hansen. They do a bench press test. I assume they were putting up 225 pounds. How many times can you do 225? And Maverick Hansen went, he was done, and he was not happy with his number. It's a pretty good number, I thought. I can't remember what it was. Ken Manning, former strength coach, was overseeing the thing, and Maverick Hansen's like, I can do better. Give me a couple minutes, I'm going to do it again. And Ken Manning's like, no, dude, you're fine. Go out of the field and have a good camp. And Maverick's like, no, I know I can do better. And Ken's like, nah, you're done. So Ken Manning, with all his experience, knows that it's not humanly possible to max out on the 225 and come back 5 minutes later and do any better. No need for the guy to get injured or something. But Hansen was not happy with his number and really wanted to do it again, but that just kind of speaks to how bad he wanted it. Then he did get the offer, comes to Michigan State, redshirted. He's basically been a backup to Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon for a couple years. Those were the two main guys, and Hansen would come in for both of them. He was a third tag team guy. Has 7 starts to his credit, but he's played over 1,000 snaps at Michigan State. Got an extra year now because of COVID. He's been through the Tucker thing. Last year became a captain late in the season. Somebody else that was a captain was no longer with the team, so he moved in. I don't think we were ever told who the captains were. That was all internal. But it's somewhere along the line last year, at the end of the year, Hansen became a captain. So, I mean, the guy that goes back to D'Antonio, then the ups and downs of Tucker. And remember, Tucker was really purging the program. They were getting rid of players all the time. They're moving players out, bringing in portal, moving players out, bringing in portal. But Maverick Hansen withstood all of those purges, worked his way up, became a starter, became a captain. And I remember last year when the season was over, Maverick Hansen, I think it might have been after the Penn State game or maybe Penn State week, Maverick Hansen said, yeah, I've got another year. And if whoever the new coach is, if they'll have me back, I'd love to stay a Spartan. Of course. I mean, I didn't hear this, but I assume when Jonathan Smith had his first meeting with Maverick Hansen, I'm sure Smith knew in about 15 seconds he wanted Maverick Hansen to be part of the program. And it's paid dividends. He's been a great leader from all indications this summer. So Hansen's an interesting guy. The last member of Farmington Hills Harrison, the last guy to come out of that program, and it was a great high school program. Coming in with D'Antonio, surfing through the Tucker years, starting things off with Smith. Barrow, Harmon transfer out. Hansen never considered leaving. 4 times academic all Big Ten. I think his hospitality management major. Maverick Hansen is a guy you can root for. You can root for all these guys, but Hansen's a guy that I get a kick out of. Other defensive tackle, I'm expecting Daquan Dowse to start. Transfer from Georgia Tech. Had a good spring. He's had a good preseason. Everything's looking pretty good. He's added some weight, added some strength. Had 22 career starts at Georgia Tech. Now he's up to 6'2", 301. Graduate senior from Savannah, Georgia. Daquan Dowse. I've not seen him at 300 pounds yet. We saw him in the spring at 283, so I'm not sure what that's going to look at, but functional plus. Inside linebacker, I'm going with Jordan Turner, 6'1", 231, voted captain last week. Redshirt senior, Farmington Hills, Michigan. Cal Halliday, 6'1", 233, senior, Ellisburg, Pennsylvania. He's led Michigan State in tackles, 3 straight years. Now it's a new scheme. He's lost some weight. He's going to play a little quicker. The scheme is a little bit more quicker hitting. One gap scheme. Your gap moves, you go with it, shoot your gap. Plus, the backup linebackers are so good that these starting linebackers, including Halliday, can max out. In the past, Halliday is playing, I don't know how many snaps last year, 700, 800. I don't know what it was. Last couple of years, that's why he put on more weight last year. He wanted to be more durable. It slowed him down a little bit. You could see it, and he admitted as much a couple weeks ago when we talked to him. Now he doesn't have to worry about fighting all 15 rounds every single week. Whether he starts or comes off the bench or whatever, they've got 4 good inside linebackers. The other 2 are Jordan Hall, Wayne Matthews. And there's some others in the program as well. But Halliday can pull the pin, turn it loose, go. And instead of playing 90 snaps a game, maybe he's playing 45. I think you're going to see a better version of Cal Halliday. I'm expecting Turner and Halliday to start, but Jordan Hall's going to be coming off the bench quickly, and so is Wayne Matthews. Jordan Hall's going to be playing on some third downs, so is Matthews. That's what I expect. And Jordan Hall was good last year, started as a freshman, he's got some leadership ability. He's second string. He's got to be super motivated out of that. And if so, that's going to make him a better player in the long run. Could be a starter by week 2. Could be starter by the second half. I don't know. But I'm looking for Turner and Halliday to begin it as the starters. That could change this week. We'll have to wait and see. At field safety, Dylan Tatum, 5'11", 197, junior, Farmington Hills, Michigan. Boundary safety, I'm expecting Malik Spencer, 6'1", 200, junior from Buford, Georgia. Started last year. Good, solid, quality player. Should be poised to take it up a notch as a true junior this year. At corner, I'm projecting Charles Brantley. Would not necessarily have had that coming into the preseason. I probably would have had Chance Rucker and Ed Woods, the transfer from Arizona State, as my projected starters, but I'm going to go with Charles Brantley. Been hearing some good things there. 6 feet, 170, redshirt junior, Sarasota, Florida. A guy that had a quick beginning to his career. It's kind of tapered off. Now maybe at the end of his career, he's got 2 more years remaining. A rebirth, a recharge. Charles Brantley would be good for Charles and this team, so keep an eye on Brantley. But Ed Woods is around. He came to Arizona State, started, 11 or 12 games last year. He didn't come to Michigan State to sit the bench. He's going to be competing. I think there's 3 serviceable corners there in Brantley, Woods, and Rucker, playing those two positions. And at the Nickelback, Nickel is going to, I think, Nickel, that's a moving target there. You ask around and you hear, they've been rotating a lot of players there. In the spring, they played all two safeties plus Mangum. They rotated to nickel, like three safeties. They could do all of it. You could play both safety positions and nickel. They want to be flexible that way, depending on what the offense does. If they come out with a surprise formation out of a given personnel group and then they motion or trade and so forth, they want to have the quick flexibility to change and everybody knows where to be instead of moving everybody on defense to mirror the offense. So they can all play nickel. They've all done it. Tatum's done it. Spencer's done it. So talking to Blue Adams, defensive backs coach this week, asking, well, what are they going to do? What's going on at nickel? Angelo Gross is around, a guy that's played nickel in the past, spent last year a little bit at safety. And Gross is around as a fifth-year senior, and he's never quite harnessed a real dependable, functional, reliable, consistent level of play. He's got it in him, but never quite locked into it. So we'll see whether he can do it now in the new system and new coaches. Would not surprise me if that happens. I asked Blue Adams if Angelo Gross is the guy, and he's like, there's a lot of guys. So I don't know who starts there. It depends a lot on what you expect Florida Atlantic to be style-wise on offense, and I have to look into that a little bit closer. If you're playing a team that's going to spread it out and throw it around a lot, you might have more of a pass defense guy there, maybe a Nikai Martinez. Now, Malik Spencer played in the slot against Minnesota, and he did against Ohio State also. Played slot nickel, and then Gross was playing safety with Mangum. That was last year, different coaches. I'm just saying that Spencer has done that in the past, been in that slot nickel area. And he's done it with these guys because they want all of them to be able to do all of it. So against Florida Atlantic, I don't know enough about them yet to try to forecast who might be there. But Adams said it could be any of these guys, and I think he's telling the truth about that. I don't think that's coach speak to get people guessing or to keep the opponent guessing. I think it could be Tatum, could be Spencer. Even though those guys are safeties, maybe one of them could start in the slot, depending on what they want to do, what they want to show. Angelo Gross is in the conversation there. Nikai Martinez is in the conversation there. Blue Adams said Armorion Smith is in the conversation there. If you wanted to go with someone who's a little bit bigger of a banger, Armorion Smith is 6'1", 210, redshirt junior out of Detroit, last year transferred in from the University of Cincinnati, was the first safety off the bench the first two games, then was lost to a season-ending injury. Because of that injury, he missed the spring, been through a tragic situation with his mother passing away due to cancer last week. The entire team you may have seen went down to Detroit for the press conference. Really a moving scene to see what's going on there, and they've really rallied around him. And a lot of the mothers have rallied around the players and other mothers too. It's been kind of nice to see on a human level, for sure. Like Blue Adams said, we wish he didn't have to go through that. It never would have happened, but team got closer last week. Armorion Smith, we've not really seen a lot of him, but like I said, 6'1", 210, first safety off the bench last year, functional player. Would not surprise me if Armorion Smith starts at nickel against FAU. Would not surprise me if he starts at boundary corner and Malik Spencer's at nickel, or some other combination with, Dylan Tatum and Armorion Smith with Nikai Martinez at nickel, or Angelo Gross. So that's a moving picture, and I think that could change from opponent to opponent. Anyway, those are my projected starting 22. That's 3 starters from Farmington Hills, Michigan. I think 2 starters from Ohio, maybe 1, 2 if you count Angelo Gross. Both of those are D'Antonio recruits, by the way. Last year, there were fewer Ohio scholarship players on the roster than any time, since in the modern era. What's the modern era? I don't know. Ken Hoffman used to say everything since World War II is the modern era. So they're going to get back into Ohio a little bit more gradually when the time is right. But gosh, Michigan State really recruited not a lot in Ohio the last few years. And you got to recruit Ohio. Come on. Out of those 22, I think 3 from Florida, 4 if Nikai Martinez starts, 8 from Michigan, 9 if Armorion Smith starts, 3 from Georgia. 2 of those are Tucker recruits. Tucker did a good job in Georgia. Plus 1 Jonathan Smith transfer. That being Dunnigan. No, Dunnigan's he's from Chattanooga? Oh, Daquan Dowse from Georgia. Of those 22 projected starters, 11 are Tucker recruits. So already just 8 months, 9 months, 11 months into the 11 months post-Tucker. 9 months of Jonathan Smith, and half the starters are not going to be Tucker guys by my projections. Could be wrong, but 11 were Tucker guys. Actually, 10 are not Tucker. 10 are either Smith or D'Antonio recruits. Talking about recruits. 10 of my projected starters are D'Antonio or Smith recruits. Aiden Childs, Jack Velling, Montori Foster, Ryan Newman, Tanner Miller, Maverick Hansen, Daquan Dowse, Jordan Turner, Cal Halliday, and maybe Angelo Gross or Nikai Martinez. Either one of those guys would be a non-Tucker guy. But if it's Armorian Smith, that is a Tucker guy. 11, I'm projecting our Tucker guys, which is a low number considering that 80% of the roster should be Tucker recruits, but that's not the way it's turned out. A lot of players left, a lot of new ones coming in. 43 new scholarship players. Half the scholarship roster are Smith guys already. But the 11 Tucker recruits that I project to be starting: Nate Carter, who was a transfer, Jerron Glover, Brandon Baldwin, Christian Phillips, Ashton Lepo, Chris Bogle, who was a transfer, Jalen Thompson, Dylan Tatum, Malik Spencer, Charles Brantley, Chance Rucker. Now the other one, Nick Marsh, he committed to Tucker, then decommitted, then recommitted to Tucker. Then Tucker was fired, then committed and signed with Smith. So Nick Marsh is kind of all those things. He's not one or the other, but Smith signed him. So however you want to define it, that's what that looks like. All right, those are the first two questions, and we've already, I'm long-winded a little bit, so 55 minutes and 2 questions. It's getting into mid-season form. We're ready to roll. I always said I want to keep these things shorter, and maybe I'll be able to harness that one of these days. Getting more into a routine now. Maybe I'll do this thing like it needs to be done and do it more often and shorter each week. But we got a lot of things to talk about. Rob South, let's go over here to the comment section. Rob South, first guy in. Joe Marsh, Eric M. checking in from Roswell, Georgia. Max Redden, Spartan, Rob South, Clinton Township. Thomas Kohlberg, Comp. Who's your pick for top Michigan State offensive and defensive coordinator of all time? Oh, gosh. All time. It's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, I'm not the biggest Prince fan. But I'm here to tell you, if you look at, I don't know who the defensive coordinator was in the 60s when they had some of those defenses that, gave up, minus 20 yards, consecutive games against like Michigan and Notre Dame and Ohio State and all those teams. Who was D coordinator back then? You got to look at that guy, right? I don't know who the offensive coordinator was when Darryl Rodgers was head coach, but when they did the Ed Smith, Kirk Gibson stuff, that was pretty strong, right? Man, that's a good one. Narduzzi had some of the better defenses. Nick Saban was defensive coordinator in '87 for the Peerless Rose Bowl team. So you got to look at Saban, you got to look at Narduzzi, whoever it was in the 60s. In the 60s, would it have been like someone like Chuck Fairbanks or something? It's, Bill Yeoman was already at head coach at Houston by then. Dan Devine? Who was defensive coordinator? Did not anticipate this question. I know there's some venerable old guard guys out there that have the answers off the top of their head, and they're like, "Come on, Comparoni, don't be an idiot. Everybody knows that it's." But I don't know who it was. All right, here we go. Coordinator. It's not listed on Wikipedia. I'll have to table that one. I'm sure someone will have that here, but I don't have a definitive answer. But those 65, 66 defenses that I remember going back and watching some of those, and the rules were different. Pass protection, you could not open your hands. You had to pass protect like this. So there was a big advantage for pass rushers because you couldn't really pass rush somebody. Therefore, people didn't pass much because you couldn't protect. So if you couldn't run and couldn't protect, that's how some of those defenses for Michigan State in 65 and 66, they were holding teams to minus 30, minus 20 yards rushing. Now, Michigan State under Narduzzi did that. Was it 2013? When Michigan State wore those bronze uniforms, I think Michigan State held them to negative yards rushing because of the sacks. That was a good defense. It was a top 5 national defense. So Narduzzi's in there a little bit. Saban's in there. Narduzzi had more quality defenses at Michigan State than Saban did. Saban was with Michigan State for, 5 years as coordinator. All with Perlis. That was a slow build and had a very good, hateful defense in 87. Narduzzi was with Michigan State for 8 years, up through 2015, right? So Narduzzi was there longer. If Saban had been there that long, they would. It's a good question. I'll open that up to others that want to talk about that question. All right, question number 3. Rothley 33 from Willow, Alaska says, is there a player not currently being talked about that you think could make an impact this fall? All right, defining our terms. Who's not being talked about? One way or another, I think pretty much every player in the roster is talked about at the Underground Bunker message board. But players that maybe aren't talked about a lot, one player who comes to mind is the second-string running back, K'Ron Lynch-Adams, transfer from UMass. Over 1,000 yards rushing last year for UMass. I think he's added 10 pounds since last year. Talked to him. He said, yeah, he has. Still moving pretty good. Anytime somebody's the number 2 running back, you know they're going to get carries, meaningful carries. So that's someone that Michigan State fans might not know that name real well, but a second-string running back is going to get work. So I think K'Ron Lynch-Adams would be the guy. Be the first one I would think about. Antonio Gates Jr. He's been a little bit dinged up here and there. He was supposed to start in the slot for the spring showcase game, but came down with like a game day ailment like right before they began, so he ended up not starting in the slot. Isaiah Johnson did instead. But Gates had a big moment in the spring game 2023. Last year had some plays here and there, entered the portal, came back, has ability. Keep hearing things like, yeah, he's really, taking his commitment to another level. Heard that in the winter. Have not heard much about him in preseason camp. But I'm not sure. But that one could go either way. And if it goes positively, I think he's got the capacity to make some noise. As far as others, real diehard Michigan State fans over at SpartanMag.com are familiar with Stanton Ramil. Redshirt freshman from Alabama, 4-star type of guy. Last year was injured during camp, did not participate full blast in the spring, but really looks the part, frame, the quickness. I don't know. With Ramil, it seems like it's a matter of when he's healthy. Is there a chance if Lepo falters that Baldwin moves over to the right side and Ramil comes in? I don't know. But Ramil is a guy that's second string that you've never seen play. If you're Michigan State, you hope that Lepo and Baldwin get it done and become the guys, right? And we've never seen Ramil play, but someone who's not being talked about, wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden, boom, he's in the game and looking okay. And then later can become even better. So Stanton Ramil, someone I've got my eye on a little bit. A second string tight end is going to get a lot of playing time and do some damage and get some targets just because of the way this offense operates. They'll run a lot of 2 tight end sets. They're going to throw to Velling, of course. But Michael Masunas, we talked about him earlier. Is he a redshirt sophomore now? It's 3rd year, right? Not a one-trick pony, can block and catch it and do some things. Just starting to get started. I'm not exactly sure how athletic he is after the catch. I'm not sure if he's a guy that can really threaten the seam. A guy on a late leak throwback. I don't know. But Masunas is someone to keep an eye on. Brendan Parachek can do those things, but he's got to get healthy. So someone at tight end is going to make some noise. Adamola Faleye, transfer from Norfolk State. I was bearish on him at this time last year, and he did not play, and I was not surprised. But he has improved his body, had a good spring, improved his body even more in the summer, and by all accounts, looks like a guy that can knock on the door to the playing group. And he's 6'7" and runs well. I'm not really. That's a guy I'll be watching like in pregame just to see what his catch radius looks like. Look to see how smooth it is. He may not play, or he might have 20 catches this year. I don't know. I'm not closing the door on that. But he looks great in the airport, and he's done a good job with his body. And I give him credit because he had a long way to go when he arrived, and he's made up a lot of that distance. So good on him. Someone long-term is going to be really good. Not sure how quickly he's going to make an impact, but true freshman defensive tackle Mike Schonbeeler. I've got some video of him somewhere, high school video, back, 30 pounds ago. He's up like 285 now. Let's see if this works. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. See if this works. Oh, can't find it. So that failed. So anyway, Mike Schottenbeeler is a guy out of Chicago Simeon. Defensive end in high school, 6'4", had some violent hands, had some quickness, played at about 260, 270 later in the year. Michigan State offered him 11th hour, like the week of February signing day. So he went unsigned in December. And some of the recruiting services didn't even have a scouting report on him. We talked about him here on this podcast back in February. Looked pretty good. Can see why they would like him. I thought he was maybe a guy that could be a defensive tackle, move inside. Not as slim as a Joel Heath type, but Joel Heath was 6'5", defensive end who ended up moving inside and became a defensive tackle during D'Antonio's glory years. Mike Schottenbeeler shows up around 280. Did not, he enrolled in the summer, was not at Michigan State in January, was not at Michigan State for spring practice. Then he started hearing some things about him. Then tight ends coach Brian Wozniak comes out talking about we were asking him about people on the other side of the ball. And he said, Mike Schottenbeeler is, quote, an utter monster. Utter monster. Strong statement. So 285 looking strong. So I don't know. Defensive tackle, it's very difficult for a true freshman to make an impact. Hearing those things, I'm kind of guessing that he'll get on the field for 2 or 3 or 4 games and then shut it down to preserve a red shirt. That's what I'm guessing. So I think Michigan State's got enough there at defensive tackle. They're not going to have to really blow his red shirt unless he's just good enough and better than others. And I guess that's possible. That'd be amazing if so. But you're talking about Maverick Hansen being in there and Taquan Dowse. Have to wait and see what becomes of Alex Van Sumeren. Getting back on the field, getting acclimated to the speed of things. He's done a good job in the weight room, showing off his strength. Jalen Satchel coming in from Old Dominion. He's 6'1", 300. I was watching him last week at Old Dominion in a 30 front defensive end, taking on offensive tackles. So he was like, at 280, he was kind of, he'd kind of anchor and long arm or two gap. He wasn't a guy in that scheme. He wasn't like trying to beat people into gaps. He was like holding and reading, reacting 30 front, two gapping, but had some strength and all that. And a guy that just kind of would press the pocket and move forward. Not a lot of people were ever moving him back. So Michigan State signs him, moves him to defensive tackle. And I think he lost a little bit of weight, like down to around 290, 285. So it's strange that someone would go from defensive end to defensive tackle and lose weight to move inside, and to lose weight to move from Old Dominion to the Big Ten. Seems a little counterintuitive, but that's what's going on there. Maverick Hansen talked about Jalen Satchel being someone who's played pretty well early in spring camp or in fall camp, and did not see him in spring practice. He was still at Old Dominion at the time. And I had him at second string last week, but that was just kind of an educated hunch. I'm really not sure who the second string defensive tackles are going to be. You have Ben Roberts coming in from Oregon, who's like 320. Went back and watched the Oregon spring game, and he's got some work to do. Watched him the first week of practice. He's got some work to do. It wouldn't surprise me. Former 4-star, borderline 4-star recruit. Wouldn't surprise me if Ben Roberts, the transfer from Oregon, becomes quite good later on. He's got a high ceiling. But Satchel might be further along. I'm not sure. Not as big. I'm kind of comparing Satchel to Sean Mallory. Might remember him coming in from Chicago, lost a lot of weight, got down to 280, probably lost too much weight with the previous staff and the previous weight and conditioning and dietitians. And when he lost all that weight, he lost a lot of strength too. And defensive tackle, it wasn't quite the same. But in 2022, moved out to defensive end when they had a lot of injuries and suspensions at defensive end. He moved to defensive end and was pretty solid and had a big impact on Michigan State going to Champaign, Illinois, and upsetting the Illini. The Illini at the time were the hottest team in the Big Ten, or one of the hottest. Michigan State put some defensive tackles at defensive end, made it work, shut down that run, shut down that outside zone. Some of the counters that they run, I don't know, Mallory was good that day. And began the year at third string defensive tackle at 285, not strong enough to be a defensive tackle, but improved his quickness, not enough to really be a threat, and maybe could have been a one-gapping defensive tackle with some quickness, but wasn't going to be like a two-gapping guy. Michigan State preferred to two-gap last year. Moved to defensive end, did some good things. Went in the portal, went to Arizona State. Around that time, Michigan State, communication-wise, was really falling apart. They had like another defensive line coach for a third straight year. Tucker was kind of, the hands were coming off the wheel a little bit, sadly for him. And so Mallory goes in the portal. Michigan State, I don't want to say let him go, but Michigan State was not tending to matters as well as they should have in a lot of ways. A lot of people transferred out. So Michigan State went out and got, what were the defensive tackles? Jalen Sami coming in from Colorado. Jared Jackson coming in from Florida State. Didn't do much, and I wasn't expecting much based on what I saw the previous year, and I said that here. Dre Butler actually looked pretty good, better than I anticipated. I watched him when he played for Liberty, was a second-string guy. Played just a couple of games at Michigan State last year, and he looked better than he did at Liberty. But then went down with a season-ending injury, and then he went in the portal. Michigan State didn't go back after him. There was one other defense. Well, they went and got Tumise Adeleye, defensive end. He didn't do much. I mean, he was a 4-star due to Sasquatch film coming out of high school. Nothing against him, but I don't know what that was based on. But Michigan State was kind of recruiting stars out of a book in some regards at that point. None of those guys were as good as Deshaun Mallory, whom they let get away to Arizona State. I'm not saying Mallory's great, but Mallory's on an NFL free agent roster right now trying to make it. I don't know if he will. Wouldn't surprise me if he makes a taxi squad and then shows up on a team in November when the injuries start coming around. I don't know if he has totally enough horsepower, but he was a good, solid college player. And that's who I think Jalen Satchel reminds me of. So I'm not saying he's a world beater, but I think he could be a Deshaun Mallory type of guy. Defensive tackle, he's up to 300 now. So last year, he kind of looked like, actually he's down to 285. So I'm not sure what he's going to look like. When he's 300, maybe there was a little bit of baby fat that could come off last year at Old Dominion. But anyway, how did I start talking about these guys? Why am I talking about defensive tackles? I don't even remember. Oh, because I was talking about Mike Sean Beeler. So Beeler might not get on the field because you got Maverick Hansen, Jalen Satchel, Ruquan Buckley coming in from Nebraska, who's just kind of a body, but he's a guy that's played some snaps. Didn't play a lot last year for Nebraska, like 60 snaps overall. Played 21 against Michigan, so I went back and watched that one. And Buckley's just kind of a big guy that can take up some space and be a body. Ben Nelson, walk on. Van Sumeren, we'll see what's going on there. Ben Roberts coming in from Oregon. So it might be hard for Mike Sean Beeler to jump some of those guys. It wouldn't surprise me if he's better than some of those guys, but do you burn a red shirt and let him play 5 snaps a game and play 5, 6, 7, 8 games and burn that red shirt? Or do you just stick with Satchel, Buckley's, Van Sumeren, Roberts as backups? I don't know. That question is going to be answered later. But in time, I think Mike Sean Beeler is going to be good based on everything we've heard, more so than I would have expected. I mean, when they signed him, I was like, yeah, I could see why you'd like him. I was not expecting him to be one of these freshman buzz guys in camp right away, but that's been the case. But someone who's not been talked about among fans, but it's been talked about in media circles a little bit. Wayne Matthews, linebacker transfer from Old Dominion. He was productive at Old Dominion. He can play some pass defense, could be a third down pass defense linebacker type. So Wayne Matthews is a guy that's not been talked about. You might see make an impact. Ed Woods, the corner transfer from Arizona State, played 12 games last year at Arizona State. Veteran type corner, they could use that. Might start. I don't know. Could be Brantley, could be Rucker. Then Woods would be, I think it's among those three. So Woods is a guy you may not have heard much about. If you're over at SpartanMag.com, I'm sure you've heard about him. But if not, and you're interested in this stuff, go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. Also, give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. That way, you will get notifications when Spartan Mag Live or when Spartan Mag Live is underway. You'll get a push notification, and we'd love to have you come back on a regular basis. At the corner position, they also have Jeremiah Hughes coming in from LSU, LeJon Cavazos coming in from North Carolina. So I'm not sure how they're all going to be in there. Andrew Brents is a true freshman. Caleb Coley's a guy that's graded out well. I thought he was a guy that was on the rise at this time last year. Only played 3 games last year, dealt with some injuries. His PFF grades are pretty good. A guy that I thought looked good in the spring game 2 years ago, so he's still around. Survived all the purges. So Caleb Coley, I've not heard a lot, but I'll be curious to see where he is and how he is on these things because I wouldn't close the door on him. But Ed Woods is a guy that's not been talked about. that could be in there. And also I'm wondering about Amarion Smith. We talked about that a moment ago. I think that he's won a lot of respect in a lot of ways during preseason camp, and he's got some physicality, so they can plug him in somewhere. A guy that played regularly at Cincinnati 2 years ago for a very good defense and was in the playing group last year before he went down with a season-ending injury. So those are some guys that aren't being talked about that could have a role and make some noise here and there. And they're going to need some of those guys as soon as Friday. All right, Sparta is his name. He's posting from, as he says, the front porch on Walloon Lake. Walloon Lake, that's beautiful. Up around here, that's Hemingway country, right? And for the front porch Walloon Lake, enjoying the day's last cup of coffee. And that was posted like 11:45 a.m. today. Last cup of coffee at 11:45 a.m. Okay, that's fair. He says, if Nikai Martinez sees action at nickel, what unique skills does he bring to the position? How do you see those skills being used creatively by the coaches? Martinez, 5'11", 191. Last year as a true sophomore, started for Central Florida, entered the portal. I really tried to go back to watch Central Florida against Georgia Tech. Today, I would try to go back and watch it. They played in a bowl game last year, the Asperilla Bowl or something like that, and could not find full game of it. Maybe I should have looked longer, but I never quite saw it. I did watch Central Florida against Oklahoma. They played last October, and Oklahoma won like 31-29, something like that. And Martinez, I'm a little conflicted because sometimes he looked like a true sophomore, which is what he was last year. And he runs okay, turns his hips okay. Not the most physical guy. Coverage skills, I never really saw him matched up in a coverage situation. A lot of two-deep zone against Oklahoma with Dylan Gabriel. By the way, Dylan Gabriel, he's since transferred to Oregon. And I think he's the leading active passer for touchdowns and yards and all these things. And I know he put up numbers for Oklahoma last year, and he's a ballyhoo transfer from Oregon here as part of the Big Ten now. But I tell you what, Dylan Gabriel initially was at Central Florida, I think, and then transferred to Oklahoma, now transferred to Oregon. So I think initially he was like a three-star guy. Not the tallest guy, not the fastest guy, playmaking type of guy. But Dylan Gabriel, a lot of people have him as like one of the Heisman favorites, and maybe that's what he'll become. I don't know. But in this game, he was okay. But I mean, not as good as, J.J. McCarthy. Not as good as 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the Big Ten last year, in my opinion. Maybe I saw him on just a pedestrian game. His numbers were all right, but he didn't freak me out. But Nikai Martinez, something I'm writing right now, writing about the safety position, is something he'll need to do that they've probably addressed during camp as they looked at his film last year. He needs to rally to the ball faster. You hear Nick Saban talk about the importance of playing through the echo of the whistle. The play's coming to an end. Get there, play through it, whistle, then echo the whistle through it. He's a guy that Nikai last year had a habit of like easing up a little bit here and there. And I was writing that down. I'm like, man, he's kind of like easing up and throttling down. Then there was one play on a screen pass at the 11-yard line that he throttled down and his teammate missed a tackle. Then he tries to catch up. Guy goes through him at the 2-yard line for a touchdown. It's a habitual thing. Second-year player, young player, got a lot of ability. That's correctable. But that's just something I saw on tape. I'm like, he's got to change that habit, and I suspect they're in the process of changing it right now, and it wouldn't have changed overnight. That's something that takes more than a while to change, and he was not with his team in the spring, so if he showed up with those habits in July and August, might have taken 2/3 of camp and then some to change those habits. But he has some ability. I wouldn't expect him to be better than Malik Spencer or Jaden Mangum were last year. So, and those guys were okay last year as true sophomores, and that's what Martinez was last year, true sophomore. So now you're expecting Spencer to take it up a notch. He should, he could. Definitely expecting Dylan Tatum to take it up a notch. So now Martinez, who's a third-year guy like those guys, good chance that he'll be better than what we saw on tape last year. And he started for Central Florida last year, a team that was better than Michigan State, a team that was 6-6, went to a bowl game, played in the Big 12 last year. So he's different than Amarion Smith. Smith's more physical. But unless he's improved, I wouldn't necessarily expect Nakai Martinez to like eclipse people that are already there, but he's a guy with some flexibility that can go play the slot or play some free safety if there's injuries and so forth. A good guy to have on the team, and when Jaden Mangum entered the portal, Michigan State needed a safety, went out there and got him. Now, when he came to Michigan State, he may not have known that Dylan Tatum was going to be moving to safety, and that Martinez could end up being a second stringer. But between those three guys and Smith, there's really 4 pretty good safeties there. 3 of them could start. Well, 5 if you count Angelo Gross. And they're going to rotate him around. Some people will start, some people will finish. But they've got some depth there. That's a strange thing about this team, is that 43 new players on scholarship, 61 new players, and darn if I don't think that this team like has more depth than last year's team, and maybe more than the year before. Like I remember going into last year, certainly by the end of the year, looking at defensive tackle and linebacker and some other places, and just, man, there's nothing. Tight end, like there's nothing behind the starter. Like, kickers, former walk-on kickers playing tight end and doing the best they can and so forth. But this team, 43 new players, half the scholarship rosters are new guys. And a lot of these guys we haven't seen play in Michigan State uniforms, but I'm telling you, you hear Joe Rossi talk about there's more depth at inside linebacker than any team he's ever coached. Just talked about Jordan Hall might be coming off the bench. Wayne Matthews comes in from Old Dominion with over 100 tackles last year, probably coming off the bench. You're talking backup linebackers, backup safeties. You could have a backup corner who started at Arizona State last year. You could have a backup safety who started at Central Florida last year. I'm not saying that they've all learned to play together and so forth. And there's a depth problem on the offensive line for sure. But defensively, I'm not saying they're going to be good, but I'm saying like right away, they've got more functional depth than they had last year. That's my sense at this point. Now we've got to wait and see what they look like on the field. But just looking at some of the names and the depth, when you start getting into third-string defensive tackles like Van Sumeren and Roberts and those guys, it's better depth than they had last year. Now they don't have a Derek Harmon or a Simeon Barrow at the top. Now Barrow was kind of becoming a little bit worse for wear anyway, but Harmon's good. He's going to be better this year at Oregon. But depth, man. If you have a guy like Quindarius Dunnigan as a second stringer, a guy that was second team all-conference for Middle Tennessee State last year, that's depth. Presuming that Thompson's ahead of it, might not be. Maybe Dunnigan starts, and then maybe Thompson's coming off the bench. That's a guy that started 4 games last year as a true freshman, played pretty well at the end of the year. If that's a second stringer, again, depth. That's what I'm talking about. More than I anticipated. Question 5, Bill from Byron Center. Hopefully out of 2 quarterbacks. He says, hopefully our top 2 quarterbacks remain healthy, and one or both of the 2 freshman quarterbacks only see the field out of choice by the staff. How committed are you to the pecking order of those 2 guys on your depth chart? Is that feeling based on specific intel from sources, your observations from practices, film of high school, or just a gut feeling? He's asking, true freshman quarterbacks, Alessio Milivojevic from Illinois, Rylan Jesse from California. I've got them as 3rd and 4th quarterbacks. He's asking me, is that based on high school film, what I'm hearing or what I'm seeing and all that stuff? He says this season certainly has a lot more areas which are more worthy of our attention than the battle for 3rd or 4th string quarterback. But a year from now, there will be a lot more focus. It's very early for those 2 guys, but an analysis 1 mile into the marathon would be appreciated. Okay, he's asking about 3rd and 4th quarterbacks. Milivojevic, I thought, had better high school film. I thought Rylan Jesse had some ability, but more loose screws to tighten up. He was committed to Utah State. Michigan State got him to flip. Milivojevic was committed to Kent State, I think it was. Michigan State got him to flip. In the spring, all that we saw was a spring showcase, and both of them looked like guys that should be picking out their tux for the prom. They enrolled mid-year. But again, I was watching pre-practice warm-ups and everything, and I thought Milivojevic was a little bit better. And I've not heard anything that's just my opinion. I've not heard that from coaches or anything. So I got Milivojevic 3rd. And you're right. Next year after Schuster's gone, the question is who's going to be the second-string quarterback. You'll have Leo Hannon committed right now, a guy from California that I think looks pretty good. He'll be coming in and competing with those guys. So, a year from now, I'm kind of expecting Hannon to be the number 2. Would he be ready for it? I don't know. That's kind of what I'm expecting. I could be wrong. And the quarterback position, there's more transfers of the quarterback position than any other position, right? So the chances of both of those guys playing 4 years at Michigan State in today's landscape, probably not great. But Michigan State needed to retool that quarterback position. Like I've said before, when the coaching staff came in, there were no quarterbacks on scholarship on campus for the first time since World War II. So they had to completely overhaul that quarterback room. Brought in Aiden Childs like everybody expected, and then got Schuster to come in as an experienced transfer willing to be second string as it looks at this point. That's a nice experienced guy to come in. Was a career leading thrower, passer at North Dakota. Comes back to the state of Michigan. That was a good one to get him. The communication that took place to make that happen. And then these two, they got them to flip, so they got a quarterback room. They manufactured a quarterback room. So, interesting question. You're looking way down the road, but that's what it looks like to me. Question 6, Tyler from Okemos, Michigan says, do you see any similarities between this year's football team compared to the 2007 MSU football team? Okay, why 2007? Well, that was the first year that D'Antonio took over. He's asking me for similarities. Some of you might remember on this show a few weeks ago, I was asked which first-year coach inherited a better roster, D'Antonio or Smith, and we went through all that. You can go check it out on the archives. We dove deep into that. So similarities, that analysis aside, there is a similarity that's coming to the forefront right now, and that is great enthusiasm and great buy-in from the players. We see it a little bit, but we don't know for sure. But players are talking about it. Coaches are talking about it. Like Blue Adams said, he said, I could not have inherited a better group of young men. He really likes the people that he's got in the defensive backfield. They're really and then the coaches are happy with Maverick Hansen, the way he's tried to lead and so forth. And Hansen, a lot of the players really wanted to be coached because they got it last year that the wheels had fallen off. And it came from the top down. I mean, it was becoming ragged. And, I don't want to beat a dead horse here about Mel Tucker and so forth. Because I've said it before, I guess I'm biased, but he always treated us well. Gave a lot of respect to SpartanMag.com, and I appreciate that. He had some great moments in 2021, and he had a chance to do some good things. I thought he had some characteristics of a salesperson that really could have done some big things in the program. But that relentlessness did not take shape or doing it. They were not consistently relentless. And as he lost focus and lost traction, others did as well. I mean, 4 different corner coaches, 4 different defensive line coaches in 4 years, those type of things. And, in retrospect, looking back at the entire body of work, he had a lot of money to work with, and he hired Scotty Hazelton as D coordinator, Jay Johnson as offensive coordinator. Hazelton had a real good year at Kansas State. They upset Oklahoma. Came in with more of a 4-2-5 type of a Big 12 type of pass defense type of thing, but just never got it to bite down here at Michigan State, and statistically had some terrible defenses. Jay Johnson, tried to be a conventional type of guy, didn't have the physicality behind it. What happened on offense, just never got off the ground there either. So the money that they had to work with at the coordinator position, those decisions didn't turn out to be that great either. So he went after some big-time 4-star recruits nationally, which was interesting to see Michigan State attempt to do that. And when they won in 2021, Tucker had at that point, had the type of personality and salesmanship that should have really capitalized. And there was that one summer, I think it was before 21, when they had more 4-stars on campus during the summer than we've ever seen around here. Didn't finish with a lot of them because the season went downhill in 2022. So never fully got to capitalize. Plus, Tucker's recruiting was not quite as relentless at that point. He had some things going on. We all know that now. But Michigan State tested some rocket ships during that era, some of which were interesting to watch in retrospect. But I'd rather not pile on him. I know a lot of you guys, rightly, understandably so, have a lot of ill will toward the previous coach and the lack of stewardship for the program. But as a person, I'm not going to be piling on that one. But any similarities, there's great buy-in because those players knew that the things had deteriorated, and they were looking forward now to getting coached by real coaches with a different culture and a semblance of accountable discipline from top to bottom in the program. And these players are responding well to it. To quote Tom Izzo, he quotes Buck Nystrom, who always told Izzo, young athletes want to be disciplined. They want to be disciplined. Nystrom used to say that back in the 60s. Izzo lived it that way in the 90s and into the 2000s. And young athletes, I'm sure, have changed a lot in the last half century, but in some ways maybe they haven't. But these young men enjoy some accountability and some discipline. And I asked Maverick Hansen, what's it like to have 61 new teammates? He says it's great. He says some of these guys, it seems like they've been here longer than that. So Hansen's really excited. He says it's way better than it was the last 2 years in terms of the camaraderie and the closeness of this team. And how hard is that? That's amazing to achieve that when you've got 43 new scholarship players. Half the roster is new, but they're coming from an area of a lot of individualism and, Ferraris and goats on the field and all that stuff. And it's a way they're trying to sell the program, but it's kind of done now it's low ego, high output, which is exactly what they needed, and a lot of these guys are responding well to it. Now we got to wait and see what it looks like on the field. I mean, Michigan State could go out and lose to Florida Atlantic. They could lose that game. They could lose to Boston College. They could lose to Maryland. But I'm confident in saying that in time, it's going to be a respectable team and a respectable program. They might lose some games here early on, but in time, I think Michigan State's a bye, and they're going to gain traction and become respectable. Maybe this year, certainly within the next 2 or 3 years. You might see it this year. So, but Florida Atlantic, that's going to be a battle. But you're asking me about similarities to 07. I would say the enthusiasm on behalf of the players and the buy-in. Question 7, Jay from East Lansing says, if an offensive tackle goes down, my guess is Luke Newman will be the third offensive tackle who could swing to either side, meaning Fincher or Brocious replaces him at guard, or do you think they would try Stanton Ramil as the third offensive tackle? Really good question, and I'm sure that they've gone through those eventualities. As of 2 weeks ago, offensive line coach Mihalchik, or maybe it was Newman that said, I can't remember who said it, but Newman had not yet played offensive tackle for Michigan State. He played left tackle at Holy Cross last year, came to Michigan State to play guard, and starting lineup looking pretty good. Has the ability to play tackle. 6'4", does not have ideal range for that position, but can do it. But like I said, as of 2 weeks ago, they hadn't worked on that yet. Maybe the last week of camp, I wouldn't be surprised if they did cross-train him there a little bit. Now, he did not play at Michigan State in the spring, so they needed to get him all sewn into what they're doing at the guard positions and what he's doing now. If he had been here all spring, I think at some point they would have done that and taken a look at it. Maybe they have, like I said. But Ramil's been coming along pretty well. You're asking if someone goes down, who's the next tackle, Newman or Ramil? My guess is Stan Ramil right now. But, he's got to stay healthy. But you're right, Newman could do it in a pinch. Have they worked on it? I'm not sure. Great question, but I'm sure it's been talked about in the war room. Question 8, Percheron Spartan says, do you think Tommy Schuster will see the field on Friday? Tommy Schuster, the backup quarterback, transferred in from North Dakota, sixth-year senior, 9,000 career passing yards. When you ask coaches about Schuster during the spring and even during preseason camp, the coaches kind of raise their eyebrows and say, hey, man, touchdown Tommy's looking pretty good. And in terms of productivity and efficiency, statistically, in one of the scrimmages last spring, he was above Childs. Now, Childs has that high ceiling of potential and all kinds of ability. But Schuster can make reads. He can throw with accuracy. He's only about 6 feet, 6'1", not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy. The arm strength, not ideal. But will we see him on Friday? Well, I'm not sure. Now, everybody knows last year that Jonathan Smith scheduled Aiden Childs to play the third series in a number of games. That's when Childs was a true freshman. So they wanted to get him some experience. And Jonathan Smith has said that he likes to get second stringers on the field to give them some experience and to manufacture depth and to increase readiness if and when they need to go in. And does he do that now with a sophomore quarterback who that they would like to give, I'm guessing maximum, they'd like to soak him with maximum reps so that he can be the quarterback and be in charge and go through some of those learning stages and expedite that whole situation. I assume they'd like to do that. By the same token, Smith likes to get second stringers playing time. Usually it's with younger players. Would he want to do that with a sixth-year transfer? I don't know. might ask that question on Monday. He might have an answer, but might want to keep it confidential. I'm not sure. So would Schuster come in early as part of a script? I don't know. I kind of think no. And I think this game's going to be tight in the first quarter, at least. 2 quarters at least. So that's an expensive series to give up early on. But maybe they want Childs to play a couple, then come to the sideline and watch one, and then go back in. I don't know. So would they script one? Not sure. I kind of think no, but I don't know for sure. Would he get in because it's a blowout? I'm not really expecting a blowout. But if so, you'd be happy about that. Would he get in if Childs struggles? Possibly, right? So those would be the 3 possibilities. I think all 3 are possible. I think the blowout thing might be the least likely of those. So do I think he'll play? 50-50. Not sure. All right, let's go to question number 9. Spartan Forever from Pentwater, Michigan says, in 2023, Michigan State's offense, I'm running out of voice here, so we might have to close this thing down. Michigan State's offense was 13th in the Big Ten in conference-only stats and total yards a game, and 13th in points per game. On defense, Michigan State was 13th in total yards allowed per game, 11th in points allowed per game. He says, based on what you've seen from the new coaching staff and all the new portal guys and freshmen in fall practice, what do you see as reasonable expectations for improvement this year on offense and defense? And wins, he says. All right, reasonable. All right, last year, so Michigan State was 13th out of 14 in both those categories that you mentioned. This year, reasonably, what's reasonable? I think out of 18 teams, middle third would be reasonable. How'd you phrase it? What do you see as a reasonable expectation for improvement? I think it's reasonable to be in the middle third. There's 18 teams, so that would be between teams, 7 and 12. And if you're in the middle third, if you're, 8th or 9th in offense, those offensive stats, and 7th or 8th or 9th in those defensive stats, it would take a lot of improvement to get there. But if you're 7th or 8th or 9th in all of those, then you'd be like 7th or 8th in both of those combined. And I suspect that the 7th and 8th best teams in the Big Ten are going to go about 6-6. So that's about where they would land. I think that maybe you can win a couple close games and do a little bit better than 6-6. But I think middle third of the Big Ten in total offense, total defense is a reasonable expectation, and that would be improvement because what you said was bottom basement. Question 10, Sola from Westland, Michigan says, for the offensive line on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being non-functional, 10 being elite, where would you predict Michigan State's unit to be at the start of the season, given what you've seen in practice and what you've heard? All right, what we've seen in practice is a lot of individual drills. We've not seen the offensive line actually, do 9-on-9 drill or inside drill against live defense. So a lot of it is feeling around a dark room, trying to figure out what things look like. Defining terms, last year, on your scale 1 to 10, 1 being non-functional, 10 being elite. Let's define terms. Last year, I would say the offensive line was a 4. They were not good on the ground. They were last in the Big Ten in yards per carry at 2.9 yards per rush, only 7 rushing touchdowns. 2.9 was dead last in the Big Ten. Terrible on the ground, and they were okay in pass protection. They allowed 25 sacks, which ranked number 8 in the Big Ten, which is, the top of the bottom half. It's okay. Combine bad with okay, I think that's like a 4 out of 10, maybe a 3.5. So if last year was a 3.5, I would predict this year, I'm expected 5.5 or 6 on your scale. So I don't think Mahalchik is going to perform miracles in year 1. I think he's an excellent offensive line coach. He's regarded as one of the best in the country. Left tackle, Baldwin's going to be better than he was last year. Luke Newman's going to be pretty good at left guard. I love J.D. Duplain, but I think Newman might be better. Duplain, there were some injuries and so forth, and I'm not sure Duplain really had the senior season he was expecting of himself, and I don't think he was as good as he could have been, but he was out there slugging and leading and doing the best he can. All respect to J.D. Duplain, but I think Newman's going to be a little bit better. Tanner Miller, I think he's pretty good. Samac last year, same thing, was hindered by some things. Samac's got drafted 7th round Chargers. Tanner Miller, more of a pure college center. I think different types of centers. Samac maybe with more physically gifted, but Miller's a good grinder. He's going to be good leader. Center position, different type of guys, but it'll be about like it was last year overall, I would think. Christian Phillips at right guard. Haven't seen him play yet, but it wouldn't surprise. I'm expecting him to be better than Gino Vandermark was last year. Just going to say it right now. I'm expecting Big Dooley to be better than Vandermark. Nothing against Big Gino. Wish him well at Alabama. That's going to be interesting down there, but I think Phillips is not going to be perfect, but redshirt sophomore, big man, I think he's going to gain some traction. Right tackle, Lepo, checking in for Spencer Brown, who entered the portal and went to Oklahoma, and I'm not sure Oklahoma got their money's worth on that one. Wish Spencer Brown luck. Lepo, not a proven player. It's an important X factor right there is Lepo, so that one remains to be seen. I'm not sure Michigan State will be better there at right tackle. For Ashton Lepo, if you're watching, I hope that, for your sake, I hope you are better. I'm not saying that you can't, but I'll believe it when I see it. So coaching and collective cohesion will be better on that offensive line, even if the singular individual players are not much better than last year. And I don't think they are. I don't think Baldwin is still Baldwin. Luke Newman better than Duplain. We could debate that one. Miller and Samac could debate that one. Phillips and Vandermark, debate that one. Lepo, Spencer Brown. I mean, the offensive line individually might not be better than last year. Probably not. But are they getting better coaching? Are they working within a structured scheme that's better for them and better in general? I think so, possibly. And better collective cohesion. So if last year the offensive line was a 3.5, I think this year's offensive line could be a 5.5 on your scale for those reasons I mentioned. And in the future, the near future, 7s and 8s and 9s are coming because Mahalchik, I think, is that good. That being said, I remember times, when Michigan State had some really good offensive line coaches come in here, and in year one, turn chicken crap into chicken salad. That's an old phrase from the 90s that I never really liked, but I kind of understand it. I mean, Jim Bowman came in year one in 1995 after Michigan State graduated some talented individuals that didn't play that great together in 94. Brian DeMarco became a high-round draft choice. Shane Hanna was a high-round draft choice. Hanna fizzled out in the NFL. Bless his heart. I hope he's doing well somewhere, wherever he is. But I could have told the Cowboys, don't draft him that high. I mean, he's okay in some ways, but those guys carried some bad weight. I'm going back to 94 with this. Burkmeyer was a pretty good center. Brett Lorius was on that team, I think, and his son's a walk-on with the team. Now, they had some good individuals, but collectively, Pat Morris was offensive line coach at that time. He went on to Stanford and then the NFL. Had a great career in the NFL, and he was the offensive line coach in 87 with Mandrich, and those guys had some good offensive lines. But by 92, 93, 94, Pat Morris, I'm sorry, did not do a great job with that offensive line. Maybe it was the strength coach, the guy who was the strength coach before Ken Manny, kind of went off the rails there a little bit. So those guys had some bad weight, not very good. 95, all those guys were gone. Bowman comes in, and you have all these like second stringers who had never played before, like Flozell Adams. He was a big time recruit, but his career was not going well. And I'm telling you, if Pat Morris and the previous strength coach had stayed at Michigan State, Flozell Adams would not have become what he became. I'm just going to say it. If Pat Morris, if you're watching, you can call me in and tell him I'm crazy. I don't care. That's the way I saw it. And good for you for having a good career in the NFL. I don't know. There's some coaches in the NFL that did not do that great in college. Anyway, Flozell Adams, Brian Musalam, Matt Beard, a lot of guys that, let's see who else was on that. There was a walk-on. Colin somebody. Tony Popovsky was the walk-on, I think. Colin Cronin. A lot of guys that had not played at all. And you're like, 1995, man, this offensive line, they got no proven players. And boom, in 95, day one, they were better than they were in 93 and 94. In 94, they were supposed to be a good offensive line. It never quite came together. And they, like I said, graduated a lot of guys that had started a long time. A couple guys got drafted. But 95, they were a better offensive line than they were in 94. First-year offensive line coach Jim Bowman made a huge difference right off the bat. Bowman moved on to the Eagles in 97, and a lot of those guys had graduated. So there was going to be a lot of turnover. And in 98, Golden Pat Rule came in as offensive line coach. Saban hired him. And 98 had a lot of new people and did okay with that group. That team didn't go to a bowl game. Think about that. Nick Saban, the GOAT, year 4 at Michigan State, didn't go to a bowl game. And he lost that team. They lost a couple games on onside kicks and stuff, but the team didn't always respond to the way he did things back then. And they were good in 99. But Rule in 98 with a lot of new parts, even though the season didn't turn out that great, Rule did a pretty good job with a lot of new parts there. And then by 99, they were good all the way around. Anyway, point is, a first-year coach like Michalczyk I've seen it done before, come in with all these parts, some of which are new, some of which are like formerly pedestrian type of players, and get them to bond together and get a good unit out of it. Kapilovic in year one, 2020, I mean, it was hard to get, that season was a null all across the country. It was a null set with the COVID situation. 21, they were good. They had Kenneth Walker. And I tell you what, when Michigan State beat Michigan, there were some really good complex blocking schemes that allowed that to happen. Yeah, Kenneth Walker was great, but that last back-breaking touchdown, Michigan State ran a bear beater. Right tackle pulled inside. They carved it out. Kenneth Walker goes 35 yards, touchdown, game clincher. That was sophisticated, real nice play against the Bear defense set up to stop the run, and Kapilovic had a nice call on that one. The rest of the offensive line with Kapilovic, he recruited well, seemed to recruit well, worked hard as a recruiter, but again, never really gelled. But Kalen DeBoer hired him at Alabama. That's a plum offensive line coaching job there. And Michigan State managed to keep him. So don't close the door on Kapilovic eventually getting it done at Alabama. We'll have to wait and see. But the offensive line last year was not good. And Michalczyk's the real deal. It's going to happen at some point. So these guys, can he pull a Jim Bowman and take this assortment with a couple of new guys and magic wand the whole thing? Possible. I wouldn't bet on it. That's coming in years ahead. This year, I'll just say this year they will be as good as they can possibly be. Whatever they're capable of, they will get that. And Michalczyk said, in an interesting quote, I think at the beginning of camp, or it might have been into spring practice, he said, the amount of things that we want to do on the offensive line, it takes a lot of time to get all those things ironed out. So they want to be varied, and they want to have a broad scheme, a broad spectrum of things that they do. It's going to be interesting to watch. I'm excited about it because, hey, it's football. Football's coming up. And also, new coaching staff, new people. It's been interesting to work with them. I would say good people. You're not getting a lot of, when you're around a coaching staff that has a lot of arrogance. And that's, you do your job and whatever. But, yeah, you go to work and talk to these people, and it's a fun job, right? And these people, they tell you what they can. They're not going to tell you everything. But I was on a talk show last week. I was talking to Fred Heumann, and he said, you sound fired up. I go, yeah, I am fired up, just because it's like starting a new book. You're like in chapter 1 of a new book. It's brand new, clean slate. New coach is coming in. I think fans eager to see what it's all about, eager to rally around him and the staff, and it's a new chapter of a new book starting, and I think I'm intrigued by it. That being said, they could lose to Florida Atlantic. Nick Saban lost when he was at LSU. They lost to Alabama Birmingham in year number 1, and at Alabama, did they lose to Louisiana Lafayette? D'Antonio lost to Central Michigan in year 2, so those things happen. So I mean, right away, Friday, people are gonna be fired up, but it's gonna be a real football game. We'll see what happens. Question 11, Molin Labe from Gladwin says, Jim, what do you make of Aiden Childs' comments about taking the over against Florida Atlantic? I hope he's right, but it made me anxious. There's some discussion as to whether Aiden Childs meant take the over on the number of wins this year or that particular game. I got to go back and watch it again. When Childs made that statement, I was interviewing Maverick Hansen, and that video is here on this channel by SpartanMag.com, but I've not gone back and watched it yet. So there's been some discussion on that over at SpartanMag.com about what he meant. Either way, it's just an 18-year-old who's getting interviewed by a lot of people, really first time in his life. Yeah, he was interviewed last year at Oregon State here and there, but not like he is now with the keys to the offense, and which is everything he's ever wanted as a college football player. But it's probably in one of these learning moments. I'm sure that Michigan State's public relations, media relations, people will say, hey, don't make any more comments pertaining to gambling. It's just not, because of the reaction it was. I guess it really made the line move in Vegas, I guess. More money went on the over for the Florida Atlantic game. So what do I make of it? It's a confident kid who's confident in his teammates, confident in himself, thinks they're going to win. Players always think they're going to win this time of year, right? So whether it be the plus 4.5 on the win total or the plus on the offense, I don't know. I don't give out gambling advice. I just think it's a young guy that made a young comment. It's probably going to be the last time. Good on him. Aiden Childs, though, he's a bright kid, an engaging kid, and he seems to enjoy doing interviews, so we appreciate that he comes out and offers some candid comments, but probably learning experience there. Question 12, Todd from Duck Lake, Michigan says, with a decent defense coming in from Florida Atlantic, coming back, do you believe Michigan State's offense is good enough to move the ball consistently against FAU? Consistently, man, I don't know. You're going to find out when I find out. And Michigan State's they're going to huddle and be under center. And one thing about the way Michigan State plays is going to play. If and when the offense sputters, because pretty much everybody's offense sputters at some point, except for Georgia. Michigan was pretty good on offense consistently last year. Ohio State sputtered against Michigan a little bit, I guess. But when you sputter, hey, I said this about John L. Smith's offense way back in the early 2000s because they were one of the forerunners of, spread offense, throwing it a lot back then. They weren't doing the hurry up yet because the hurry up hadn't really come into vogue because the 40-second clock hadn't really started yet. And back in the John L. Smith days, some of those offenses put up good numbers. But if you throw, punt, you do that a couple of times, even though it seems exciting back then, theoretically, that you're throwing a lot. But any offense you do when you start punting, it doesn't look good. This offense, the way they grind it out and slow it down a little bit, if it's not working, it's not going to look good either. But I'm telling you, it can be effective once they get it established. But if all the components aren't completely plugged in and ironed out and sharpened up and ready to roll, it can start looking like Iowa a little bit. Now they're going to be a lot more dynamic than Iowa, but they'll do zone and counter boot off the zone, kind of like Iowa does. But they'll have more plug-ins for explosives on the backside, and they're going to be interesting. So you're asking me, do I believe the offense is good enough to move the ball consistently? I don't know. I mean, the run game, we just talked about the offensive line. Childs, can he drop back and make all the reads? I mean, how excited is he going to be? Is he going to be overly excited? We've not seen him as a starting quarterback ever. So you're asking me things, I'll go on the Huge Show and some of these other radio shows to ask me about what Michigan State's going to be this year and so forth. I'm like, hey, we'll talk about all these things. We'll talk about these individuals. But Michigan State as a team, what do you think when they play Rutgers in November? Man, that is so far off. I don't know. I don't know what this Michigan State team, I've never seen them play. Never seen them play a game, and neither of you. 43 new players. It's great to talk about college football in the offseason, but in the month of June, July, and into August, we're trying to pontificate about, Florida State, they'll beat Georgia Tech. Really? Have you ever seen Florida State play this year? No. You ever seen Georgia Tech play this year? No. Look what happened. We can pretend about what we expect. And I go back to like last year with Northwestern. Northwestern was coming off 1-11 season. Pat Fitzgerald had they had the big hazing scandal. They lose a lot of coaches. Players their brains are all scrambled. They hire Braun just because he was the coach. He was the new coach who had nothing to do with the hazing incident. So he becomes interim coach for a 1-11 team. They had no chance to have a good season last year. Everybody picked them to finish 14th out of 14 in the Big Ten. People would have picked them to finish 60th out of 14 if they could have last year. And they went out and went 8-5. He should have been National Coach of the Year. Didn't they beat Utah in a bowl game? I think they beat Utah in a bowl game. Northwestern. They were lead pipe cinched to be terrible last year. But we didn't know. We never saw them play. We didn't know for sure. We don't know for sure what Michigan State's going to look like. We can talk about it. It's fun to talk about it, but I don't know. They're going to be consistent on offense? I don't know. I've never seen them play. Question 13, Sparty Dance Party in Mackinac City says, if everything goes right, what is the ceiling for the number of wins? I just mentioned the Northwestern example. I'm thinking 8 is the ceiling, but Northwestern won 8 last year with a bowl game. So why not 9? As a whole, I'm looking at 6 swing games on the schedule. The 4 in November, Illinois, Indiana, Purdue, Rutgers, even though a lot of people think Rutgers is going to be good. And I don't doubt it. They're going to have a good defense, good run game. And by that time of year, that will play really well in November. What they look like at that point, I don't know. What Michigan State looks like at that point, I don't know. So maybe Rutgers isn't a swing game, but we'll call it a swing game. It's at home. I don't know. Those 4, and then in September, at Boston College, at Maryland. Those are the swing games. Boston College game is going to be the red bandana game, which is their circle the wagons, get fired up. Home game against a strange opponent, get fired up September. It's in commemoration of 9/11 going back a number of years. It's really a neat thing that they do. And they took Florida State to the 15th round last year before losing. That's going to be a tough game. Cavazos is a good quarterback that can make some things happen. Bill O'Brien's a good coach, taking over a program that has some maturity to it, even though Lafley left to become a coordinator. It's not like a total rebuild going on there. They're going to be tough that day. And Michigan State's going to have to be sharp to win that game. That's a swing game. Maryland, Tagovailoa's gone. Offensive line needs to be retooled, so but they're better everywhere else. Explosive receivers, better defense. It's a team that won 8 games last year also, right? Did Maryland beat Auburn in a bowl game, or did Minnesota? Who beat Auburn in a bowl game last year? Was it Maryland? So maybe Michigan State's going to be an underdog at Maryland. Boston College game is probably going to be 1 or 2 either way. I'd say Michigan State might, depending on what they do against Florida Atlantic, Michigan State, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I think those are the 6 swing games. The way I do it every year usually is, okay, that's a lot of swing games. That's more than normal. That's 6 swing games. You go 3-3 in your swing games. That's fair, right? That's 3 wins. Then beat Prairie View, that's 4 wins. If you beat Florida Atlantic, that's 5 wins. Probably a 5-7 team just looking at it, but I don't know. I've never seen him play. Don't know. If Cade McNamara is not healthy, he is healthy right now, but they've got a better backup this year also with Iowa. But Iowa's defense is going to be, they were very good last year. They'll be better this year. Not as explosive on special teams. But last year, Michigan State should have beaten Iowa on the road last year. That's a 10-win Iowa team. As bad as Michigan State was, they had that game won and screwed up a couple of punts. Strange sport, isn't it? So, that's kind of my expectation on that whole thing. All right, question 14, the last one. JRMSU from Southfield, Michigan says, does University of Michigan, do they get a postseason ban in excess of 2 years from the NCAA for sign stealing and non-cooperation? ? Excess of 2 years? No. Excess of 2 years means 3-year bowl ban. No chance. No way. Maybe 1. 2 would surprise me. That'd be fun to see that happen, I have to say. But that would surprise me. But it does seem like the NCAA is doing a lot of saber rattling. It seems like there's a lot of saber rattling going on. But more than 2, no. All right, let's go over here to the comments section before we wrap things up. It's good to have Old Tuck back with us. Old Tuck checking in. I don't know if he's back home now. He says the traditional Orion post looms. That's true. Orion, I've not seen Orion in a long time. Used to see him around town back in the old days, and he always posts a very heartfelt story about season anew with reflections about his father, and it's always fun to check that out at SpartanMag.com. John Elkey says, go green. Brad Fashenko checking in from Austin, Texas. We hope that Brad is keeping Austin weird for us. Thanks, Brad. Ellison B19918 checking in from Fayetteville, Georgia. Old Tug says, I have a feeling our offensive line coach could easily eat 7 bratwursts and drink 15 to 18 hams beers on a standard night. That guy is tougher than a 50-cent steak. I think Old Tuck wants a job as a columnist at SpartanMag.com. 15 to 18 hams beers. Hams the beer refreshing. Was Hams the beer from Sky Blue Waters? Is that Minnesota or Wisconsin? Austin Wolf says, got you comp, can hear it. All right, well, that was a long time ago. Tom Helderman, good friend, MSU 66. Tom and Tanya checking in from over by the U Club. Question, do you think Smith might give not the freshman quarterbacks some time as opposed to Schuster because the younger guys will be back next year? Good question. I think he'd go with Schuster just to get him acclimated with this group in case of emergency. Good question. Hope Tiny's doing great. Send her our love. Great to hear from you, Tom. John Schick says, let the CJS era begin. John Elke says, Boston College is this year's road game for me. Who else is going? Mark Webster says, knew this was happening week before game one. Could smell it. Well, I hope you didn't step in it, but it's good to have you here. Eric Iverson says, I can hear you. Mark Webster says, do you have the depth chart predicted? Went through it earlier. Carl Schneider says, can't hear Comp. Can anybody else? Tom Helderman says, I think he posted that one again. Max Redden says, who all going to the Friday night game? Let's pack the house. I'll be interested to see what the crowd looks like. I think there's a lot of, I think that a lot of people like Jonathan Smith. I think that there's a lot of people that are behind him and like what they see thus far. I do also think that there are some fans with some misgivings about just the general direction of college football, which could be reflected with less student season ticket sales. I'm not sure what those numbers are at this point. Old Tug says, what was your take on Courtney Hawkins' interview? He told Huddleston he was even keel, but also couldn't hide his excitement about the wide receiver room. I don't know. Yeah, and Laskow had a real good story over here at SpartanMag.com with good comments from Courtney Hawkins. And, we've talked to Hawkins for 4 years, but this was the most, he's a square jaw, iron face type of guy. Not a guy that's going to throw around a lot of hyperbole, but there were some interesting quotes. I'm looking at them right now. Talking about the players, he says the players are genuinely happy hanging around this building, wanting to be in this building. There's not a black cloud over this building. He says, I think the energy level for us is through the roof. It's a different kind of energy. There's been a big time effort to actually mend some feelings, mend some fences. At this point, this team is one of the closest teams that I've been around the last 3 or 4 years at this point in the season. So that's more of what I was talking about earlier, the buy-in. These guys want to be coached. They want to be teammates. It's kind of a reaction to what didn't go well last year, but again, it's 43 new guys. Hawkins says, quote, normally it takes some time. You're continually growing through the season, but this particular group of guys, they hang around here. They're all hanging around each other, holding each other accountable. You can see guys hold each other accountable, and then there's not any pushback from the other guys, which is just showing growth as a unit. I think they're excited to play for each other, unquote. All right, he says, just a great group of dudes, man. He says, family's big around here. I think on the staff there's like 25 little kids from like 12, 11 years of age and under. He's talking about the Michigan State coaching staff and the little kids that they have. He says, quote, there's nothing like seeing these little kids just running around the office upstairs. It creates a different kind of feel. It's not all work. It's been really good. And the bottom line is we are going to win football games, unquote. Courtney Hawkins from last week. Quote from Courtney Hawkins, he says, Coach Smith came into this situation and took it and kind of spread an umbrella over the top of it and took care of everything and let these young men know that they're special and they are loved inside this building. We've got them. They're practicing hard, been doing some good things outside of this building that have been fun, that bring us together, bring us closer. This is really a close-knit unit, and that's all because of the things Coach Smith has implemented from day one, and it is still in process of doing it right now, unquote. So it's Courtney Hawkins last week. This is a story that Jake Laskow wrote over at SpartanMag.com. You can go check it out right now. Strong quotes. Hawkins says, quote, for me, this particular offense, it's really the first time that I've had to dive into this kind of offense, so it's been cool. It's been challenging, which has been cool for me from a football standpoint because I do know a little bit about football. Quote, but Lindgren, offense coordinator, is a great teacher, really an even-keeled guy, so it's really been good to work with him. He's about details. He's a really great play caller. He does things to set up the play, to set up plays 3-4 plays down. plays down the line, which is really good for us from an offensive standpoint. You're going to see some different things from a Michigan State football team from an offensive standpoint that you haven't seen in a minute, unquote. Courtney Hawkins, always been a very even-keel type of quote. You can go watch that video here on this channel, but you can tell he's included in the buy-in. He knows some good things are being planted, and that's kind of what I see too. Haven't seen them scrimmage 11 on 11 yet since April, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Derek Greer says the game should be played on Saturday, so Derek does not agree with me. I respect his opinion. John Schick says, who scores Michigan State's first touchdown on Friday? I got Carter Childs Velling. Old Tuck says, how does Marsh compare to Donnie Corley? Similar. Donnie Corley had a lot of talent. Is he, did he get drafted or free agent this year? I forget. He was being talked about, right? Corley was good. Marsh is a little bigger, but they're similar. John Elke says, I like the Friday night game on Labor Day weekend. George Page, who's former guitar player and keyboard player for Surrender Dorothy, which is one of the top 25 East Lansing bands in history. Surrender Dorothy, George Page, ladies and gentlemen. George Page says, high comp, anything to look for on the defensive line. I went through that earlier. I think I did enough earlier. Sorry, George. I already pretty much covered on that. All right, I can't help it. I mean, Dowse, I want to see Daquan Dowse. He's added some weight. What does that look like? 22 starts at Georgia Tech. Pretty good player. Georgia Tech's pretty good, by the way, just now. So he comes to the Big Ten. What does he look like? Is he a functional player? Was he functional plus? Maverick Hansen's always been functional. Does he go functional plus now? Hansen's going to be playing in a one-gapping scheme now. Not always, he's just a good, solid plugger grinder. Maybe not a quick one-gapping guy, but what does Hansen look like in a quick one-gapping scheme? It's going to be interesting. Van Sumeren is a guy that always had good quickness. And in a one-gapping scheme, I'm eager to see what that looks like. His own quickness. Now, the D-line coach, Langi Suayanoma, said that Van Sumeren, having missed last year, he's getting acclimated to the quickness of the things as they move. So those are two different things. Being quick enough to adjust to what's going on, but also when you're trying to get upfield, just being a quick player into a single gap as a defensive tackle. I do think that Van Sumeren has the ability to be a quick one-gapping 300-pounder. I want to see it, but I think he can. And for that reason, I think that this scheme could be better than the previous scheme for Van Sumeren, but we'll have to wait and see. D-line, I mean, I talked about Thompson and Dunnigan and Bogle. I don't know who's behind Bogle at rush end. I think it's Anthony Jones, the transfer from Indiana, who played some Sam linebacker from Indiana. Chad Wilt comes to Michigan State. He was linebackers coach, and he was co-coordinator at Indiana. He was defensive coordinator earlier. So it's a guy that he had in Indiana a year ago. Comes and reunites with Joe Rossi, with whom he worked at Minnesota 3 or 4 years ago. So Chad Wilt, a Joe Rossi guy from the past, goes to Indiana, comes to Michigan State, and Jones comes with him to be probably, I assume, the second-string rush end, stand-up end, edge guy. So a lot of stuff, a lot of different, Ken Talley's a guy, probably the third defensive end, and he was making some noise in the spring. He's got some ability. When I talked about the depth earlier, that's the type of guy I'm talking about. I mean, Ken Talley last year played defensive tackle out of necessity because they named him defensive tackles left. But he's a defensive end. He moves back out to defensive end. He's a guy who's played a little bit. Former four-star recruit at Penn State that transferred to Michigan State. Third string guy, but that's what I mean. He's a guy that can play a little bit, but there's enough depth on this team that guy's a third stringer. I'm not saying he's a proven good quality college football player, but I think he's heading in that direction. Still just a redshirt sophomore. Third stringer. So a lot of stuff on the defensive line. Even Coach Langi Suayanoma was saying last week that, at defensive tackle, he wasn't sure how it was all going to shake out. Maybe he was saying that so that the press wouldn't pin him down on who the first string is. Maybe that's just the way he wants to do it. But it seemed genuine that going into the second scrimmage, the difference between second string and third string, or third and a half string, all those guys were all bunched together. So there's some depth there, but maybe not some guys that are like proven excellent guys. You know, Ben Roberts, the transfer from Oregon, talked about him earlier, and Jalen Satchel. I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but as we begin to watch them, I don't know what we're going to see, but it could. I think there's some functional, capable guys, some grinders, maybe not plus players right now, but if you get a bunch of guys playing together and playing accountable football, willing to grind for one another, that's kind of what Northwestern did last year. And you can win some close games with that going on. Aaron May says, Comp, do we have enough depth on the O-line and D-line? I went over that a minute ago. D-line, there's depth. Is it plus depth? Remains to be seen. Offensive line depth? I don't think so. Starters might become good, and the young guys on the second string might become pretty good in time. But no, you don't want to dive too deeply into second stringers along the offensive line at this point, I don't think. Kazoo Green says, checking in for Portage. It's game week. Let's go. Ron Dooley says, rumor has it Tommy Schuster had a good camp. Any thoughts on Tommy Cutlets? I just consistently hear that he's good, solid, functional. They feel good about him. Gregory Wank says, MSU Wank here from Saline, Michigan. Are you doing pre-snap reads this year? Yes, planning to. And thanks for asking about that pre-snap read. We do, the pregame on Fridays usually. We try to create those. It's wordy, but we try to create the most in-depth, comprehensive, accurate pregame analysis in the history of the human race. That's what we try to do. I'm going to do that this week. But first week of the year, it's usually more about Michigan State than it is about the opponent because Florida Atlantic has not played a game yet. We've not seen what they look like, so I can't get in depth on what they're going to do because I don't know what they're going to do. John Elke says, is Marsh playing with the first team? I think he is. He's getting at least some reps. Does he start with the first team? No, but he'll be in the playing group. Mark Webster says, any word on the health of this team? No major injuries, hopefully. There were 2 or 3 or 4 guys that had some dings. Nothing, long-term out for the season. But there's some guys that are out. And, we see some guys that are in boots at practice and things like that. But they don't want us to report on that, and I respect that. Because if we in the press corps start coming in and reporting about, this guy's got something on his right knee and this guy's something on his left knee, before long, they're just going to say, all right, all you guys are out. You're not allowed to come back in anymore. So that's it's not like you're doing them a favor. Those are the terms, I mean, none of us are Hemingway, but when Hemingway was covering World War II and was behind enemy lines, or not behind enemy lines, but was on the front lines, he couldn't report from where he was. And that's the way it is with war correspondence. Not that this is war, but these guys are getting paid a lot of money. The coaches are, the players are too. And the team that's coming up here to try to beat them on Friday, they're getting paid a lot of money too. So it's a business, and most coaches appreciate coverage, but you can't be giving out health information, firstly. Secondly, I've never been big on it also because I go back to 1993 when Nigeria Carter, wide receiver at Michigan State, had a rib injury, and it was reported that he had a rib injury. He missed a couple games. Then he came back. He said he played against Michigan, and he said he could tell that they were taking shots at his ribs. I was like, man, that's heavy. I would never want to be someone that reported, somebody's ankle's injured. And then they go out there, a 21-year-old kid to play football, and another team is taking shots at his ankle. I ain't going to be doing that. So you can call me a bad reporter if you want, but I'm not pinpointing injuries, those type of things. But you asked how's the health. There's 3 or 4 guys that have been banged around a little bit. Some guys they're in the 2 deep. So we'll wait and see what it looks like on Friday. Keith Tunstall says, Comp, you must be bored. No, not bored. Dogfather 1978 says, hey, Spartan fans, Georgia fan here. This show popped up on my algorithm just now since I've been trolling Michigan fans all day. Michigan cheated. Go Dogs. Man, this guy's getting a lot of friends here. That's cool. JJ McKay from the Keweenaw says, Keith never has anything positive to say. Real turd. That's not nice, JJ McKay. But I like JJ McKay up there in the Keweenaw. I like the Keweenaw. I might be tromping around a little bit up there in October when Michigan State plays basketball up there. Dogfather says, have a nice evening. How about the Dogfather, man? He's got a good football team to watch. JJ McKay says, hello, Dogfather. I hear Michigan just got the notice, the NOA, notice of allegations for illegal scouting today. Yeah, that's the word. That's been reported. Not sure what's going to happen there. Mark Webster says, last year, Friday night opener was great. Excellent tailgate. One home slice, says, was Coach Smith big on trick plays during his time at Oregon State? A lot of you'll see a lot of misdirection throwback stuff. When John L. Smith was coach with Dave Baldwin as offensive coordinator, they would run a trick play every game in the second quarter. Trick play was coming second quarter. Cartoons is what he called them, and some of those were pretty good. I wouldn't say so. I mean, I've watched them. I've not watched every snap, but I'd say it stays pretty conventional. But within that conventionality, there's some outside the box tangents here and there. A lot of late release sneak route type stuff. Is that a trick play? Not so much, but there's some misdirection. JJ McKay says they did some. I'm stoked for Friday. Mark Webster says, don't be silly. Give your cans to Willie. Willie the Can Man, an East Lansing legend. JJ McKay says, I have a couple of 55-gallon trash bags full in my basement comp, not in the environment here. When I was 11, I was getting into state games in the second half for free and collecting cans after the game. Big money back then. All right, we're about ready to move on. Didn't get any callers today. That's fine. I'm going to zip through this. Jim says, could this be the deepest backer room since 2013? It's different because back then Michigan State had 3 linebackers. Now they've got 2 plus a nickel, so how do you factor that in? Inside linebackers, those 4. But you're right, in 2013, I remember writing about it in Spartan Magazine that I thought the third string linebacking crew could start for some Big Ten teams. I thought that back then. I can't remember who was that. That would have been around the time Darian Harris was a third stringer. Maybe that was 2012, 2013. I have to go back and look at it, but there were times when first group was good, second group was good, and third group was, I thought, Big Ten caliber. So I'm going to say not as deep as that, even though Rossi says it's the deepest he's had at the inside linebacker position. Confirming man says, can Michigan State beat Texas? I doubt it. Marsh will be good in the slot as well as wide out. We don't play Texas this year, says J.J. McKay. So John Cunin says, should we be worried with Florida State's loss? Quarterback did not lead them to the pot of gold. All right, pot of gold, little pun there over in Ireland. Should we be concerned, you're talking about Michigan State fans, with Florida State's loss, talking about the quarterback. All right, the quarterback was DJ Uiagalelei, who was quarterback at Oregon State last year. So I assume that's what you mean. Should Michigan State be concerned because the former coaching staff's quarterback? So Uiagalelei went to Oregon State for 1 year as a transfer and was part of a very good team at Oregon State last year and a very good Pac-12. They let a couple games get away, had a couple other big wins. Uiagalelei last year for Oregon State was good, not great. One game I remember against Oregon, a lot of intensity in that game. And this play just sticks out to me. But first or second play of the game, they run a counter boot roll, had Jack Velling, I think Velling, the tight end, wide open on an over route, or it wasn't a drag, it was like an over route. It wasn't like a 5-yard shallow one. It was downfield 10 or 11, 12 yards. Wide open, should have been a gain of about 25, and Uiagalelei just missed him. So opening script had a wide open play, and Uiagalelei missed him. Got a lot of respect for DJ Uiagalelei. Took a lot of abuse at Clemson. Dad seems like a nice guy. Wish him well. But when Jonathan Smith and company came to Michigan State, they had a good relationship with Uiagalelei too. I'll just call him DJU. DJU said a lot of good things about Oregon State and the coaches and what they did there. Had a lot of good things to say on the Andy Staples podcast. I was going to do a story about that back in May, but never quite materialized. But a lot of goodwill between those two sides. But when Jonathan Smith came to Michigan State, I've not asked them about this, but I suspect the conversation went something like this. Hey, DJU, we love you, but you go into the portal. Why don't you go someplace where you can win right away? We're going to go to Michigan State. It's going to be a rebuilding process. We're committing to Aiden Childs. He's coming with us. And they may not have said this, but they didn't want Aiden Childs to sit another year. Probably something along those lines, because they parted on very good terms. DJU went to Florida State. Childs came with Smith and Company. If Smith and Company had, they've not said this, but if they had really, 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 really loved DJU as a quarterback, they would have tried to get him to come with them to Michigan State. I never got the feeling that they did. DJU had kind of an average game against Georgia Tech, and I was not surprised. Let's see. Just zipping through some of these things. I guess we'll just wrap it up now. It's been a long, long show. I appreciate everybody chiming in. JJ McKay says, watch comps footage from practice of number 48 at tight end quarterbacks. One of the last videos, Baker makes a great one-handed catch that was low and away, laughing out loud. Talking about Baker, Charlie Baker, true freshman, East Lansing High School, walk-on. And when Michigan State collected their walk-ons last year, and Baker was one of them, I saw him around here a lot. Coached against him in baseball. Saw him play basketball also. Good three-sport athlete, battler. Good quickness and speed and frame for a tight end. Yeah, I'd say he's like a MAC level scholarship guy, but it's harder to get scholarships these days because of the portal, because Power 5 teams are only signing 17, 18 guys. So a lot of good players that normally would sign with the Power 5 are sinking down to the mid-major level, and everybody's keeping room for transfer portal guys. So then your Central Michigans and your Western Michigans are getting better players that are falling to them, and then they're not signing 25. So scholarship-type players are walk-ons now. I think Baker's one of them. I think that's a good one for Michigan State. And walk-ons, tight end is a position at which walk-ons often make an impact. It's hard to be a walk-on at corner, you know. It's usually hard to be a running back or a walk-on. I guess walk-ons spring up pretty much everywhere, kind of. But tight end is a place where walk-ons can make some noise. And I think Baker down the road is a guy that could do that. Doors Fan 91 says, Avery Dunn have a shot to make the playing group again. You know, every year he's kind of like outside the playing group, hangs around, ends up in the playing group by the end of the year. They've got him at rush end now, stand-up position, which necessitates some pass coverage as well. I've never seen him cover a pass, so I don't know what that's going to look like. So I'm not hearing about him a lot, but he's a mature body that's been around, and he's shown that he can function in a college football game. So they're talking about playing a lot of people, so I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, at rush end, it's supposed to be Bogle and Jones from Indiana, and then Dunn is in there somewhere, and Ty Gillison from Cincinnati. So that's 4 guys right there, and they'll probably play 2 of them. So it's going to be tough at the beginning. Let's see. All right, a lot of good comments. And we're going to wrap it up now. A lot of good comments. Appreciate it. All right, man. That's it. We appreciate everybody coming in. We got coverage of Jonathan Smith's press conference tomorrow. It's going to be Monday. It's game week. We'll have coverage throughout the week and more stories to come. So go to SpartanMag.com. Be a subscriber. We'd love to have you over there. Give us a like here on this channel and also subscribe to the channel here. Don't give us one of these. We don't need that. So give us a like, and that helps. And if you subscribe, you'll get a push notification whenever we're live, and we'd like to see you next time. So check out our coverage over at SpartanMag.com. I want to say thank you to Paul Konendijk and Jake Laskow, and Jason Killip, Kenny Jordan, and the cast of thousands. I talked to Big Mooby today, and I was hoping he'd come on the show, but he's traveling. He's back now, but he was not able to get on this one tonight, and we hope to hear from him soon. We certainly value his insight and expertise. We'll get him on soon. So everybody have a good, safe beginning of the week on Monday. We'll see you soon, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.